I'm John Taylor. I'll be your cruise director for Positively Aging, but it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. A beautiful day for the 10th annual Positively Aging Conference. Welcome to the Art of Balance, or Blueprints for a Healthy Future. How's everybody doing? You look gorgeous, all of you. Well, this is a community initiative, and it takes a village, and I am the idiot, the village idiot. That's my job. My name's John Taylor. I am your morning host, 6 to 10, Monday through Friday, on KK 106.5 and 92.1. And so it's nice to see some of our listeners out there. I love you. Thank you for listening and supporting. But our community really comes together to help with positively aging. And of course, we have to say, HIV Positive Aging Research Project at harp-ps.org. We love you for doing this. And all of the volunteers, you're amazing. The LGBTQ Center at the Coachella Valley, at thecentercv.org. Jewish Family Services, Brothers of the Desert. Love you. LKA, that's Let's Kick Ass, that's the AIDS Survivor Syndrome Group. We thank you. Let's Kick Ass. The Alzheimer's Association. Eisenhower Health. Jack Newby in Palm Springs, and DAP Health. These community organizations. We don't want organisms. There's medicine for that. But these community organizations throughout the entire year work really hard to bring this conference. And every September, in conjunction with National HIV/AIDS and Aging Awareness Day, which is September 18th, this conference coincides pretty close to that date, and we thank all of our sponsors for their generosity and for their hard work. Now, this conference can only happen with our sponsors, and they are Eisenhower Health, SCAN, Desert Oasis Healthcare, Your Life, Your Health, Our Passion, BIOS Clinical Research. By the way, BIOS had Tic Tacs for everybody. Did you see the Tic Tacs? I'm the Seidler. If you watch Seinfeld, you know it. What does that sound? It's Tic Tacs for BIOS Clinical Research. Gilead is here, thank you. Napo Pharmaceuticals and Thera Technologies, the Jocelyn Center, and last but not least, KK 106.5 and 92.1. And they are printed on my paycheck, so I love them. A little bit of housekeeping as we begin. We are meeting today on the traditional territory and the ancestral lands and homes of the Agua Caliente Band of Cahuilla Indians, a federally recognized Native American tribe based in Palm Springs. And we recognize, honor, and pay respect to them as the traditional stewards of the lands and water which we now occupy. We honor the Agua Caliente and other indigenous caretakers of these lands and waters, the elders who have lived here before, the indigenous who are here today, and the generations to come, and we thank them. Now, as you are facing the front of our aircraft, you will notice that there are exits there, and there, and there, and there, and there. So that's where the exits are. The bathrooms, did everybody see where the bathrooms are? They're out in the hall, and to your right as you exit. Now, there is a note about photography. As you go out this door, isn't it on the right? Oh, both. It's bathrooms in both directions. All right, look for the little cartoon character of your gender. Now, we wanted to let you know about photography. And because this is going to be recorded and streamed on YouTube for people all over the world to benefit from this wonderful conference, there is a note that if you are sitting any closer than the first 4 rows, you will probably be on the camera, and if you would rather not, then move 4 rows back. The entire presentation is going to be posted on social media, and we cannot wait to share this wonderful program with the world. In addition to today's programs, you will see a raffle ticket which is stapled to the survey that is on your seat. Now, we expect you to fill out that survey completely.
Thank you. Hi. Let me get my picture off the screen. There we go. My picture will come back in a sec. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate every time I get to work with Harb. Thank you, Stephen, Jeff, and everyone at Harb for inviting me. My role today is to kind of set a little bit of a framework in which we can work today. So the theme today is balance. And as I think we were just sort of thinking about, balance is a little bit hard right now. There's a lot happening in the world. And we're gonna bring actually some of that in today as we talk. I do have a little bit of business to get through, just as a psychologist, no conflict of interest report. Just a little bit about me, for those who have not seen me talk. My name is very weird. We can acknowledge that. My first name is Ami. It's A-M-I, pronounced kind of like Tommy without the T. I should check. Can people hear me in the back? Yes. Yes, awesome. Okay. You can just call me Ami. My last name is even weirder. It's Student. It's just the last name. It's a little bit unclear how that happened, but we're stuck with it. I guess was going to change it at some point, never got around to it. I do have a doctorate in clinical psychology. I actually have a PsyD, which is sort of equivalent to a PhD, but it's a little more clinical in focus than research in focus. My specialty is in health psychology. So what that is a sort of intersection between medical and mental health. So my specialty looks at things like chronic pain, sleep, and chronic illness. So I spend a lot of time working in areas, and HIV psychology in particular is of personal interest to me and professional interest to me. And in fact, my dissertation was in HIV psychology, as were some of my clinical roles at the VA. I worked at the VA for quite a while in a lot of different clinics, pain clinics, HIV clinics, liver clinics, primary care clinics, and again, in those sort of intersection places where people's bodies weren't cooperating, but that of course impacts how people are feeling about their lives. So that's sort of the world that I work and live in. I left the VA about 3 years ago for private practice, just in time. And I did not know what was coming down the pike. I'm located here in the Coachella Valley, but my practice is actually telehealth, so I see folks throughout the state of California. I'm also licensed in Idaho and Oregon and see clients there as well. A good portion of my practice involves this sort of intersection of health and physical and mental health, but I also see some general mental health concerns as well. Okay, now we really will get my picture off the screen. Okay, so we are here to talk about balance. I think it's important when we throw around words like balance, they can kind of sort of be, there's a lot of sort of a sense of what balance is can sort of really vary depending on sort of what frame we're talking about. So I want to kind of just think about what this means to start. So first off, when we think about balance, for most of us, one of the first things we think about is sort of the balancing of our physical body, right? The surfing, the using a cane and holding ourselves up. I was a professional dancer before I was a psychologist, so I didn't spend a lot of time on toe shoes, but that's a lot of balance. This person's doing the work. So when we think about balance, one of the things I think is important to kind of consider, it's really sort of this very intricate sort of active approach, right? We can't just, balance isn't about just sort of letting things happen. Balance actually takes some active choice making to really hold something up against gravity. And it's often, in fact, holding different pieces of something up and holding them in a certain sort of formation so that you don't fall. And what I think is most important about balance is thinking about this active choosing part. It's going to take some commitment. This doesn't just happen. I often think about when I was a server or a waiter for a long time and I had a tray of drinks, I couldn't just take drinks off without thinking about how to balance my hand when that drink came off. Otherwise, if anyone's been a server with a tray of drinks, you know what happens, right? So you need to be, there's sort of this active, sort of very intricate dance that's happening, even with my hand in that moment. So I just want to kind of consider that as we move through the day, that a lot of what we are going to learn today is about how do you sort of hold those different pieces a little bit more carefully to make sure that you're sort of thriving as best you can. When we think about healthcare, we think about wellness, and this is where I think sometimes when we think about wellness kind of words, sometimes they just get thrown around and we're not really thinking about what they need or why they're necessarily useful. We think about nutritional balance or financial balance or work-life balance. What do those actually mean? So I want to kind of sort of dig in today from a psychological perspective of what balance might be and when it's helpful and also when it's not helpful. Because balance isn't just sort of magically the best thing ever. It is about sort of this give and take. So I'm a psychologist, so I'm gonna present balance from this psychological perspective, but I think it will allow us to kind of see the day, hopefully in a useful way. So not everything in psychology is best at balance, but there is a framework that we know when people are more in balance that we tend to see people thriving better, and when things are out of balance, they tend to be struggling a little bit more. So I want to talk today about the 3 circles of emotion regulation. That's a lot of words, but basically what this is, it's 3 systems of emotion that we all have. They are all hardwired into each and every one of us. And these 3 systems work together to help us navigate the world. They come from evolutionary psychology, that they were really designed to help us thrive and survive in the wilds. But we know from a lot of research that these 3 systems govern a lot of our choices and a lot of our emotional experience. Unfortunately, what can happen through our experiences as children, as young adults, later as adults, can be that some of these systems get overdeveloped and overrepresented in our life, and some of them get underdeveloped and underrepresented in our life. Some of those experiences may be well beyond our control, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. So what can happen is these 3 circles don't look so even. So let's talk about each of the circles first, just to kind of get a sense of what they are. So the first system is the drive system. So this is our resource being system. This system is hardwired in to help us not be still. This is the system that gets us motivated to go out into the world, to find resources, to find things that are important to us, to build things, to achieve things, to consume things. 2 primary examples of this would be the hunger drive and the sex drive. The hunger drive motivates us to go find nourishment, food, and consume it. If without this drive, we would just be sitting still hoping that we'd fill up at some point. It actually gets us out into the world. The sex drive is similar, right? It takes us out into the world to find sexual connection with other people. What this allows us to do from an evolutionary standpoint is to actually go out and build and achieve and create. So from the hunger drive standpoint, go find food. Sex drive, perhaps even go find, for some folks, mates where those genes will get passed on to the next generation. But even to find things like, we look at in the wilderness, building nests. Nests come from this drive system, right? Because they go out, the birds go out, and they find material to build this nest. We go into the world and find ways to build shelters for ourselves. So this is a really important piece. This is how we move from being sort of internally focused to externally focused. In fact, the drive system, when it's turned on, one of the things that we know is our attention goes out into the world. It goes into our surroundings, and it tends to also go into the futures. How can I build something or achieve something or obtain something? Now, all of these systems are connected to emotion. And this is where we get sort of to the real psychology of this, which is when these systems are turned on, they tend to feel certain emotions. And it sort of makes sense based on what this is about. So you start to feel emotions like joy or satisfaction at achieving something or accomplishing something, a sense of pleasure. You ate that really good food, sexual pleasure, this sort of movement into the world, enjoying what's out there. Pride at building something, achieving something, reaching a goal, and enjoyment. Now, as we go through each of these systems, I want you to just sort of start thinking, just sort of lightly, we'll get into this later in the talk, what might happen if you have too much or too little drive in your life? What might this look like if this gets out of balance? So I'm curious, just before I head to the next slide, does anyone have any maybe examples, let's say small examples from your life of the drive system being activated? Where you're out there obtaining something, achieving something, reaching something, completing something from their life. Yes?
My partner and I.
I don't think it's on.
My partner and I.
Why don't you just go ahead and I'll repeat what you say.
Hello.
Yeah.
My late partner and I bought and built a house together and improved it and made it our home, and we spent a lot of money and made it our home. And then after 7 years, he passed away, but it was our pride and joy. We made it our home.
Fantastic. So there's so much drive in there, right? So just the whole process of designing, creating, building together, and then that pride, that joy showed up, right? Probably every time, or many of the times that you even were together in that place.
Yeah.
So that's a huge and great example. I put together a ton of examples on each of these. I tried to find things that were kind of just sort of small little things. So, completing a to-do list for the day can be that drive. Getting yourselves here this morning, right? That drive, for many people, that drive system was turned on. This was a goal to get here this morning. Finishing a difficult puzzle. Sometimes it's just something enjoyable. I tried to bold a few that might have a little bit more to do with the HIV experience, having interactions with the medical world, having interactions with illness. So activism, we talked about the history of activism. ACT UP, right? Lots of drive involved in folks' lives involved in ACT UP. So that sort of drive to achieve something, to change something, to build something, that's all drive system. We're going to do some cooking work later, cooking something healthy for yourself, that drive to increase your well-being and do something good for yourself. Let's talk now about the threat system. So we're all, unfortunately, I think probably very familiar with the threat system right now. Most of us living in the current world are sort of the triggers for threat, the stimuli that produce this system are all around us. The threat system is designed to motivate us to protect ourselves from harm, from danger. Most commonly seen in the fight, flight, freeze response. This system is activated from an evolutionary standpoint just to protect ourselves, to allow ourselves to survive when there's danger. It sort of has the framework for our minds of a sort of better safe than sorry framework. So this is everything from sort of the obvious, right? There is a dangerous external force. You're at a campsite, there's a grizzly bear. For humans, what's interesting is we have an additional layer of this, which is that we can think into the future. We can also reflect on the past. So we can see danger or potential danger, or even subjectively potential danger up ahead. So last night when I was practicing this talk, I started to get anxious about today. My mind started to say, oh, what if I slip over this word? Or what if the audience doesn't understand this? Or I'm not explaining it well. And I started to have a little bit of a threat response to what could happen, because my mind, like all of our minds, can do this. So we have this sort of this added piece where we can, and then, you can start to see where this can be very helpful in predicting and concerns about the future, but also can also get us into a little trouble. So from an evolutionary standpoint, this one's real clear, right? How do we keep ourselves safe when there's a threat? Now, I want to also just know what happens to our attention. So in the drive system, remember, our attention goes out into the world and into the future. With threats, where our attention goes is to danger and to the threat. So if I put people in a police lineup, we know, and let's say I get mugged and they do a police lineup for me, we know my chances of identifying the person are pretty slim. We've done a lot of research on that. And that's because my attention is going to go to the barrel of the gun. I'm not going to pay a lot of attention to what's happening around that barrel, because that's the most dangerous part. And that is what happens when we get into the threat system. Our attention narrows. And if you've ever been anxious about anything, you know where your attention goes. Everything else goes away. You're focused on that one potential dangerous thing. And that's because the threat system is activated, and we want to be worried about the claws of the grizzly bear, not the bird in the tree, right? I mean, that's a useful thing. We don't want to be distracted by other things when we're in a threat response. So again, you can see where this can be helpful, perhaps where too much of it and sort of overload of it can cause some problems because we're really focused on threats and not maybe the rest of our lives. And too little of it, we can start to miss some things. So what are the emotions that are connected to the threat system? Well, the obvious one I was experiencing last night, anxiety, right? That's pretty clear. Some fears, some anxiety. Anger also shows up. Flight and fight, right? Fight is anger. If someone cuts you off in traffic and you get upset and angry at them and you want to flip them the bird, that's because your threat system is on. And that fight response is sort of getting activated. So anger is something we definitely see. And also what happens to your attention when you're angry? Just as it does with anxiety, it narrows to the threat. We actually, a lot of times when I'm working with clients and they have some concerns about their anger, one of the things they forget is all the other things they've been working on in session, and they want to bring more loving and care to their partner, and they get angry and they get back into that threat mode, and all they can do is get defensive and angry at their partner. Why did they really get it? Well, it's because their attention narrowed. So, disgust. Disgust is another big threat emotion. You can sort of see evolutionarily where that would be helpful. Oh, I want to eat this, or drink out of this lake, and it's really green and smells bad. And maybe I shouldn't do that because it brings on this emotion of disgust, right? That's a really good response to some danger ahead. Shame, embarrassment, sadness. We talked a little, if you heard my talk a few months ago for Harp, we talked a lot about body image concerns. Shame is really involved there. That threat response goes up. What if people don't like me and I don't feel, and I've done something that will exclude me? So when we think about threat, though, not only are we thinking about the current sort of socio-political world, we're also thinking about what is the threat of living in a body with HIV? Well, there are clearly numerous sort of social constructs that impact living in a body with HIV that are also going to bring that threat response. So HIV stigma being a primary one. And stigma, remember, can be something that's very specific and explicit. Someone is excluded because of their HIV status, for instance, or it can be sort of subtle and implied in a setting or structural. So sometimes these threats are very clear, and sometimes they're subtle. Death by 1,000 paper cuts kind of concern. And that threat system may be on a lot without us even realizing. When you walk into a medical setting, is your threat response up? Because of experiences you've had, medical trauma experiences, HIV-related stigma issues. And obviously this intersects with other areas in which our culture can sort of lead toward providing threat to people. So homophobia, transphobia, racism, ableism, bullying, especially among young people. We see that sort of rising their threat response. And histories of trauma. All of these can come together and cause people to experience elevated threat responses and overdeveloped threat systems. The other thing that I did put on here, which is just what is it like to have an illness with symptoms? Symptoms cause our threat system. Chronic pain is a sign that our threat system is on, because pain is a sign that there is something dangerous. So we are often, when we are dealing with symptoms of any kind of chronic illness, even outside of HIV, we are experiencing some sort of threat to our well-being. So I want to, again, I kind of put a bunch of smaller examples of just the threat system. And again, these are just sort of day-to-day examples. So the most obvious one is there's a loud noise outside and we all adjust, right? That's the threat system being on. That little surprise. Actually, surprise is sometimes part of the threat system too, emotionally. Defensive reaction to criticism. A neighbor says something to you about, your music's too loud, right? I don't know, something, and I can hear you through the wall. We sometimes get defensive at those things. We don't even know why we get defensive sometimes. It's that threat system being activated. Someone's coming after my sense of worth. Getting anxious before a big presentation, just had to put that one down. Surge in anger after being cut off in traffic. And again, I bolded some that might be a little more related to the experience of living with HIV. Now, remember that some of these are personal, and your own experience is going to have a different impact on which system kind of gets pulled. But let's say you're dating online, and you are aware that sometimes when you disclose your HIV status, that people are at best rude, and at worst rejecting, incredibly stigma focused in how they respond. Maybe they ghost you. You might have your guard up. So the third system is often neglected. So you've probably heard of fight or flight. You've probably been told, go out in the world and build something and do something. They call that behavioral activation in psychology sometimes. What we forget a lot is this soothing system. This is equally important. This is one that's a little less encouraged by our culture too. So what the soothing system is, it's actually often called sort of colloquially the rest and digest system. So if you think about any animal, I always use the example, I don't know why, of two hippos. You got two hippos going down a river, right? They're looking for food, that's your drive system. They're running from a predator, that's your threat system. They're hanging out, watching each other, rolling over, that's your soothing system. We need that system. We can't always be going out in the world for something, and we can't always be running or fighting something. We need to be able to recover. So this is where we actually can soothe our system, help our nervous system recover. It's also where connection happens. So another example of that, I'll use the animal example, is when you have parents of a certain animal and the kids are kind of playing and exploring, it's because they feel safe and comfortable and they can let their hair down, so to speak, and explore the world and play. That kind of connection between those kids, that playfulness, happens because they feel soothed, they feel safe. And we need that too. So a lot of connection with others both soothes us and allows us to, it sort of works both ways. The soothing allows us to build the connection. So these are often also related to these calm, pleasant emotions. So calmness, contentment, peace, and connectedness with others. So this system is actually really important to our well-being, both from an evolutionary standpoint and from a sort of healthcare, sort of holistic standpoint, I guess is the right word. So some examples of the soothing system. So that's, I bolded some of these again, but that sort of most obvious example is if you've ever gotten a good cuddle or hug from a partner, a pet, or you cuddled up to a stuffed animal or a really soft blanket, that sense of that you get. That's a great example of that soothing system. Being somewhere out in nature for a lot of people can really spark that soothing system. But it can be in small ways too. Let's say you're nervous about your blood tests and you get a really good set of results back. And you know that you can now kind of let go and relax for a little bit. All that work you've been doing with your provider to kind of stabilize your numbers and everything kind of came back fine. That can be really relieving. So sometimes the very thing that might have been a threat before, now with a bit of change can become soothing. All right, just keeping track of time here. Want to make sure we're okay. So I'm going to ask everyone to either close their eyes or look down for a sec and just kind of take a moment so you can kind of be a little more internal. And I want you to think about your last week, your last 7 days. And I'm going to ask you, I'm going to take you through each of the 3 systems and just remind you of each. And I want you to think about whether that system was large, medium, or small this week. Whether it was a big part of your week, a mid-sized part of your week, or a small part of your week. So let's start with the drive system. The system of going out, engaging in the world, finding things, building things, enjoying things, emotions of enjoyment and achievement and accomplishment and pleasure, pride. And just for yourself, thinking about your last week, how big was that system? And then I want you to now move to the threat system. The system where things are dangerous, where you need to fix things, where you need to fight with things, you need to wrestle with things, you need to escape things, where you're feeling anxious and fearful, or maybe a little frustrated or angry, embarrassed, ashamed. Certainly interactions with the healthcare system come to mind sometimes. And then the soothing system. How much of your week was spent in that sort of safe, content, calm, peaceful, connected space? Was it a small amount, a medium amount, a large amount? And sort of thinking about, if you think about these in relationship to each other, where was one or two large and the other two small? And then just sort of zoom out to the sort of whole of your life and think if last week represents sort of overall how life has been. As I said, we kind of live in a world where threat is sort of being activated frequently. There's a lot of triggers for threat right now. All right, go ahead and open up your eyes and come on back. So I'm not going to ask anyone, these are personal, so I'm not going to ask people to share. But just beginning to think about the balance here. How balanced are your systems? We know that when these systems are in balance, this is a place where we know that people are generally doing better. And we really do need all of them. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I want to weirdly enough first talk about what happens when they're out of balance. So this is a very common framework of which I see in folks coming into therapy with. There are others, but this is sort of one of the sort of setups that I see a lot. So when we have too much threat, when we're always in threat, let's say we are dealing with things like affective stigma, we're dealing with a world that feels increasingly threatening. Maybe we have some personal concerns that are threatening, issues with a partner or a friend. We tend to find ourselves in a sort of chronic stress state. It's really hard to be fighting and fleeing all the time on our system. You can imagine what some of the impacts on our physical and mental health that would have. We see a lot of anxiety in folks with that threat system that's sort of exaggerated and overrepresented. And hypervigilance, because once we start to have that threat system on, we start to see everything as potentially dangerous. So we're kind of always looking for danger in every situation, every setting. What's the problem? What's the problem to be fixed, or to be addressed, or to be avoided? Now, some folks, when let's say they're growing up in a system that's threatening, maybe they had a really hard childhood, there was a lot of threat in their lives. Maybe they were queer growing up and there was a lot of bullying. Let's say diagnosis of HIV, dealing with HIV stigma, dealing with medical systems that are not necessarily the easiest to use. And there's a lot of threat in their lives. Some folks then sort of say, hey, I can't live like this. I need to go out in the world and sort of achieve something. I need to feel some sense of control, some sense of meaning and purpose. And they go out in the world and they focus a lot on achievement and building something and making something happen. That can be really useful for folks. The challenge is that when you've got a lot of threat and then you get a lot of drive, what tends to happen is people start to burn out. Because they're always going. And I have a lot of clients who come in and who are like what I call high achievers, but really it's sort of this response to, I can't be living in threat, so I'm gonna go out in the world and sort of prove to myself and others that I can do, make and build and do. And what happens is often they come to me because they've burned out. They're often restless, like nothing really is good enough, they need more. The other thing that happens with excessive blue is sometimes we see a lot of pleasure seeking. Because I don't feel very good in threat, so I'm gonna go and I'm gonna try to find a lot of things that feel really good. I'm gonna go out in the world and consume things that feel really good, and that can be sometimes substances, it can be other things that sort of gambling, that sort of make us feel like, that sense of, I'm getting somewhere. And what tends to happen is soothing is really underrepresented. And so when we don't have enough green, we tend to feel very easily overwhelmed. We tend to feel disconnected from others, unable to relax. We burn out much more easily. Now, this is just one setup. I could also sort of describe setups where folks have very little threat. Now, these are the folks that miss every problem. Everything's fine, right? Nothing's a problem. I mean, we all probably either are or know folks like this, where they kind of miss that, maybe a friend is really angry at them and they have no idea what's going on as though nothing has happened. The world is falling apart around them, they're about to lose their housing, and they want to talk to you about, I don't know, what to do on their own, right? Like these are those sort of like unbothered. So too little threat is also an issue. So out of balance, right? Too little drive. We see this a lot when folks come in depressed to treatment. It's really hard for them to even imagine engaging the world and building something for themselves. So that sort of lack of drive can be really a challenge too. So what do we do? Next slide. Oh, here we go. Perfect. So the goal is balance. So what we don't want is to get rid of these systems. One of the reasons I spend a lot of time going through the systems today and with clients is we need them, right? We don't want to miss, there are things that are threatening in our world that we need to address. We need to be out in the world building things and achieving things and finding homes with people and sharing lives with people, finding other people to engage with. We need to feel a sense of belonging and calm and contentment at times. We need all of these. And we see this the easiest way to think about this is kids. Kids need this when they're developing. They need to be able to search for and build things. This kid wants to learn how to use the light switch so they have some control over their world. I don't know about you, but this is a very distinct memory of me first hitting the light switch. For some reason, I have a very distinct memory of that. A reaching that control that something comes with that. We need to be able to know that there are things out there that we need to not hang out with. I remember as a kid being told what poison ivy looked like. That was important. And we also need to be able to soothe. And sometimes that starts with another person, an adult, a parent, hopefully, who can soothe us. And eventually we can learn to do that for ourselves as well. And we need that as adults as well. This guy needs to be able to take his medications, the drive to take his medication, sort of finish that novel he's working on, or write back that friend. This woman needs to be able to cross the street, and she's maybe gonna cross it a little slower, needs to keep an eye over her shoulder that no one's gonna hit her. And these two folks gotta be able to sort of enjoy and be together, looking out at our beautiful valley, and rest and recover. So it's about balance. It's not about losing these. It's about finding a good balance for yourself. So how do we do this? So I'm gonna go through the ones that are sort of most common, but today is the day. We're gonna go through lots of ways in which you can build balance in your life. So thinking about what you need more of, or less of, really pay attention today. how can you engage some of the things you're going to hear about in ways that allow you to build balance for your own circles? So cultivating more drive, we usually say start with some small stuff. Set a daily intention to do one thing you want to accomplish. Write out some goals. Have you thought about goals? Sign up for something new. One of my favorites is purchase and nurture a plant. Something I'm playing with now. I am not a green thumb, and I am trying to become one. Grab the easiest plant you can find online and nurture it. So you have something that you are working towards. Learn any task on YouTube. Learn how to replace something that's broken in your house. Now, for most of us, we're going to cultivate some more soothing. There are more formal ways to do this. There's lots of breathing exercises. For some people, certain mindfulness traditions can bring some of this. Engaging with nature for a lot of people really can do this. It's summer beautiful. We're just getting to the weather where you can engage it more from outside the window instead of inside the window. Cuddling with a pet, a person, or a blanket. Find somewhere you can sort of have that sense of listening to relaxing music or sounds. Now, what's also cool as humans is we have this ability to imagine things that most other animals can't. Imagining something calming activates the system in the same way that being near does. So if you can really put yourself into a setting with your eyes closed, just imagining yourself in your full bed, somewhere beautiful that you really feel relaxed, you can actually bring that same system into activation. And community. So, you're all here. We know that activating the soothing system, one of the best ways to do that is finding a place of belonging and connection. And that can be with one other individual, it can be with a small group, and it can be within a larger group. But finding a place where you feel a sense of, I can just be. Now, we also, when we're in groups, can have the threat system can be turned on, other things can be turned on. So it takes a little bit of work to find the right places for you where you can let your hair down. So I find that a lot of clients are sort of very resistant to signing up for a group activity. I think there's something about we were all in high school and forced to sign up for some group activity, and it feels sort of weird or something. I don't know what it is. But I cannot tell you how successful it is for folks. There's a little bit of drive in there. It's not you gotta sign up for something and show up, but hopefully, and there may be a little bit of threat when you have some social anxiety and how's this gonna go. But if it works out, boy, can it be healing. Boy, can it be balancing of all of those other things. The world we're in is intense. We need places where we can stop and slow down. We know from a lot of research, but probably everyone's personal experience, that sharing experiences with people is one of the best ways to connect with them. So that's why these kind of activities are great. My mom does a lot of mahjong. If anyone's aware, sort of Judaism and mahjong in America are like this. So my mom, through her local synagogue, plays mahjong 4 times a week. She has done now, overnight, they do sleepovers and do mahjong until late, And I've never seen her more than when she talked about mahjong when she's over. I've luckily been at the house when she's hosting a mahjong night and gotten this day of laughter, and those things are really important. So I really invite you to consider kind of stepping past any kind of, I don't know what your mind says about groups and things and what's going to happen, and sort of doing some work. It also may not be the first group. That's the other thing. You may have to do a little exploring and find where your home is. It may just be finding the 2 or 3 people in the group who you want to meet with on a different Saturday. Also, sometimes support groups can really be this way, right? Sometimes it's sort of sharing an experience that was hard can be really supportive of that sense of connection and belonging. And for some people, it's spiritual groups, religious groups. So I just want to offer that this is a really great way to find this through other people. So, in summary, we all have these hardwired. You don't have to go and find the hardwiring. It's there. That said, certain parts of the wiring have gotten a little grooved in. by what we've experienced in our lives. So if you are someone for whom, say, threat is really big and soothing is really small, or you are someone who spent much of their life in drive, go, 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 and has a lot of trouble relaxing, or maybe is so focused on that they don't see that they're not actually, that the people around them are really getting upset with them all the time and maybe missing some of the threat. I have a client who I work with remotely who has been in a life of building a career to the point where his family is kind of like over it, and missed it, and all of a sudden finds himself kind of like on the edge of that. Like if you need to balance out, just again, you're gonna have to do some work to balance. It's gonna take some active choice making, but it can be done. The ultimate goal is to balance more regularly. There will be settings where one of those systems has to rise to the front. It should. But what we want to be thinking about is if we sort of step back into our life and look at our life, how do we do it? That's why I asked about 7 days. I didn't ask about how you do it, like right now. I want to kind of think about the average of it all. One of the things that I want to just mention is that if one is too big, you can sort of pull back on it, but it's almost better to go for the one that's too small and build it. It will naturally pull the other one down. So if threat is too big, if you increase soothing, your threat response will decrease. You don't have to just decrease the threatening stressors in your life. Sometimes we can't. If you're in a situation, let's say a living situation where there's a roommate who's really difficult and you can't move, what are you going to do? Well, you can't actually take that trigger out, and you could increase some of the soothing in your life. So the aim here is balance. We've got about 4 minutes for questions, for comments. Just thoughts, comments, questions, and be curious to hear what people's reflections are.
Is it on?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I'm not a social media person, but I've had a lot of professions in my life, and one of the first ones was a flight attendant. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to a friend who said you should go to Facebook, and there's a group, and I reconnected with the group, and it was really satisfying to reconnect with all those people that I haven't seen for 20 or 30 years, and it really is soothing.
It's soothing, yeah. And that satisfaction, I mean, there's the emotional component, right? And I think that's a great example also where sometimes we don't have to look as far as we think we have to look. You went back to a group of people that you knew provided that for you and reconnected. Sometimes in session I'll do that with folks, okay, where have you already had it versus let's find something new. I love that.
Thank you very much for your talk. It's very insightful, personally for me. I'm not like a plant person, but I have grown some living creatures on my patio from their inception. And I really get a lot of joy. I have a small patio, just a few plants, but I get a lot of joy out of spending time with them. Mm-hmm. And I'm like literally obsessed with this corner of my patio and the way that it's evolving. It's like a painting, and it's become really motivating. And I was just saying to myself this morning that, you know, I like being obsessed about this particular spot in my patio.
I love it. I love it. And now not only is the plant, it sounds like part of that sort of reinforcement, just being in that spot is like, oh, I did this thing. And again, I hear joy, I hear satisfaction. So that's a great example of drive. I wonder also sometimes drive can then turn into some soothing. It sounds like being there also is soothing for you. Lovely. Maybe one more?
I just wanted to share that my partner and I are long-term survivors and we're also runners, but we still have like a drive to train for marathons.
Yes.
At one point in my life, I thought HIV would be a threat for our running. And after a couple of years attending the HARP HIV positive series presentations, it changed my mind about living with HIV long term. And the soothing part was when Kay ran the San Diego Marathon a couple of years ago, and I ran the LA Marathon and kept receiving that pressure medal and and coming to the cross line was very soothing for us.
Yeah. So again, that sort of line between drive and soothing, right? So there's a drive there to complete this thing, then you complete it. And so that's where the soothing part comes in.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Continue throughout the day to kind of think about where you can pull one of these up, maybe if you need, through some of the work that we're going to do. Nourishing the food is really the way to go for some soothing. So, all right, thank you so much.
We're going to welcome our next speaker, who is going to be hands-on. Chef Shannon Bush has been a plant-based chef for over 30 years. She is actually not an animal-based chef. She is a plant-based chef. She is not mineral. She's plant-based. She has worked as an executive chef, a head baker, caterer, culinary instructor, and Shannon has a wonderful time leading vegan tour groups throughout Japan. She loves to demonstrate the many benefits of plant-based eating. And who knows, Nicholas, maybe you could grow some plants and then incorporate them into recipes? Would that be like soothing? I don't know, but we've got Chef Shannon Bush. She is going to help you be delicious and help you be healthy, eating in a plant-based way and do it without sacrifice. So, please welcome Shannon Bush!
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Hello. I am so glad to be here today. But something Dr. Ami said sort of triggered something that happened to me a few weeks ago. And if you'll bear with me, I just want to share it with you. So when Stephen first reached out to me and asked if I would be willing to come and present today, I said, sure, wonderful. This sounds great. Let's do this. So that was in the beginning. And then about a month ago, when we were having a pre-conference meeting, he said, oh, by the way, our keynote speaker is someone who's regarded to have made one of the best speeches of all time. I said, really? Okay. I do this, what I'm doing now, out 12, 15 times a year. I don't generally get nervous because I have such a good time up here sharing my passion for eating this way. But when he told me that, wow, I thought, gosh, I don't know. Can I compete with that? I don't know. I don't want to embarrass myself. I was speaking at an event in Seattle a couple of weeks ago and happened to have a good friend that was there. And I said, I'm kind of nervous. For the first time, going to be at this event and one of the speakers has given one of the best speeches ever. And my friend, wise man, he said, you're not a great speaker, but that's okay because you're passionate about what you do. So I said, thank you, I think. But he said, you know what? I bet she's not giving out free samples. So I'm feeling really good about this. I'm going to have fun in here showing you what you can do with plants, and you're getting samples today. So just think about that. So, just going to start kind of broadly. Why would someone choose to eat this way? And by this way, I mean plant-based. And if plant-based is a new word to you, plant-based is the updated word or way to describe someone that's a vegan. The B word. The B word kind of became a dirty word. So market research was showing that if a product in the store was labeled vegan, people will walk right by it. The assumption is that it doesn't taste good, don't know what that's made of. So you'll notice now a lot more labels are using the word plant-based instead of vegan. And that's fine. It means the same exact thing. So eating vegan, plant-based is eating without any animal products whatsoever. Its cousin is a vegetarian. Vegetarians often eat dairy products. But vegan is someone that does without dairy, without any animals, anything that had a mother. So that's the difference between the two. So why would someone do it? It can be a pain in the neck, I can tell you that much. So why do that? I'm often the butt of all the jokes out there. I'm often the person that someone rolls their eyes, oh, crazy vegan. There's that joke, how do you tell if someone's a vegan? Wait 2 seconds and they'll tell you. One of my favorites. Yeah. So why put up with that? Why go to it gets exhausting, I've got to tell you. But if someone chooses to do this, there's usually 3 main reasons. Usually they identify with one or all of these 3 things. Number 1, health. There is clear, ample data that people that eat this way have far fewer instances of the major killers in our country, and the world for that matter. Cardiovascular disease, strokes, diabetes, cancer. You're just not putting yourself at risk. You're greatly reducing your chances, but data is there. Data doesn't lie. Data does not lie. Second reason, animals. Does anybody love their pet dog, pet cat, bird? I have a dog and Corvus. Anybody else? So, who was it that decided, I'm gonna love and cherish this animal, I'm gonna pay their exorbitant vet bills, but this one, I don't care if he's raised in horrible conditions and then dies in terror in a slaughterhouse. Who did the picking and choosing way back? Who decided this one we love, this one we don't really care about? If you're like me, I think all animals should be treated well. I think, there's no reason. It's not that hard to go through life without eating them and paying into that. So that's number 2. Number 3, the environment. What kind of world do we want to live in, and what kind of world do we want to live for those coming along behind us? Animal agriculture is one of the biggest contributors to our climate changing. They also drain our natural resources like groundwater. And the Amazon forest, I don't know if any of you are aware of it, it's very far away, seems very remote, but it's considered to be the lungs of the world. The Amazon rainforest is being cut down as we speak every day to make room to graze cows. And again, if that sounds like a remote thing, do you know where a lot of that beef goes? Right here in the US. So if you're buying that beef, are you okay with what it takes for that beef to exist? So, your health, you love animals, you care about the environment and the world, you're going to leave those that are coming along. Usually one of those 3 reasons resonates with somebody. I happen to feel strongly about all 3 of those things. So there's just no question that I will put up with the jokes, the ridicule, the eye rolling. It's okay. Eating this way used to be a lot harder than it is now. It's really not that hard. There's so many great products out there to help you transition and slowly make your way towards this change, if you want to. I'm not here to push you, but I'm just hoping that my enthusiasm will rub off on you, and maybe plant a little seed of thought, and then at some point maybe you would consider maybe just one day a week. Why don't you be a plant-based person one day a week? Think of the impact on the world. How much groundwater would be saved, how many animals would be saved. Anyway, something to think about. Does it go backwards? Yeah. Let's, okay, yeah, that's me. Used to be a chef, worked in restaurants for years. At one point, sort of as a little side thing, I started teaching plant-based cooking. It came to the point where that became more exciting and more interesting to me, and I felt like I was making more of an impact teaching people how to cook with plants. So that is my focus now. I have started a series of cookbooks, and the cookbooks are based on the most common questions I get at my cooking demonstrations. I don't know if any of you come to my classes at the Rancho Mirage Library. They are free. They're sponsored by some generous donors at the library. There's one next Thursday, 2 o'clock, just saying. But that's really where my passion lies now. I really like to try and get people to understand that eating this way is a win-win. You know, there's no downside to it. And I hate this, I try to avoid calling it a plant-based diet or a vegan diet, because that word diet immediately puts that thought in our head, sacrifice. Oh, I've gotta, I can't have what I want. It's a diet. Just the plant-based way of eating. And I promise you, you can still have delicious, satisfying meals, even if you eliminate the animal products. That is what I hope to show you. Another thing I've added recently is I love to take groups of people on fun vacations. Just last May, took a group to Japan. We spent a couple of weeks exploring central Japan, eating our way around. Took a cooking class over there. We had a great time. If that's something that interests any of you, check out my website for the next trip. Okay. So, oops. Previous. There we go. Why would nutrition matter? Why would plant-based nutrition or plant-based eating, oh, I used that diet word up there, who did that? Okay, just pretend that's not there. So why would that be helpful to someone with HIV? Well, we all know that HIV makes our immune system go haywire. Guess which way of eating supports your immune system? Plant-based eating. It's going to support your immune function, and it's great at reducing inflammation in your body, which is helpful on so many levels. You're going to feel better. You're going to have more energy. You'll tolerate medicine better. And you don't want to layer on something else. If you have HIV, your immune system already has enough going on. You don't want to give it diabetes to handle too. You don't want to add cancer or heart disease. Give your body a break. Let's just keep it at the one thing and not add to it. Eating this way will greatly reduce the chances of adding a comorbidity. Go ahead. So, the good news is we're going to make my tunaless tuna today, and you'll all get to sample it. The bad news is I didn't think I could pull it off quickly enough to do a second recipe. So, just the one recipe today. Go ahead. So, if any of you, if I've piqued your interest and you want to learn more, those are some fabulous resources. NutritionFacts.org. It takes every nutrition study in the world, uploads it to this website, and some of the key findings are there. So if you're someone living with diabetes and you want to know what the latest studies show from the most respected organizations, go to NutritionFacts.org. It's there. Wonderful resource. The other thing, I know there's some great doctors in Palm Springs, but there's an organization called the Plantrition Project, and they are a group of physicians and healthcare professionals that have banded together and are doing many things. But one of the things they're doing is trying to put pressure on the U.S. medical schools to teach nutrition. doctors should know what causes the condition that you have, not just how to diagnose it and treat it. So most things out there that can happen to us with our health can be traced back to how you eat, your lifestyle. These are doctors, they're regular old MDs, doctors, but they are part of the organization, which means they have committed to keeping up to date with nutrition, learning, and information. At that site, you can type in your zip code to see if there are any doctors that have that nutrition knowledge and education along with their MD. I mentioned this at the group I spoke with a couple of weeks ago, and somebody said, well, I can't do that because my insurance doesn't pay for alternative medicine. And I said, no, these are regular doctors who also have nutrition training, the training that they didn't get in medical school. So regular old doctors, but they on their own pursue education and nutrition to complement what they know. In fact, they just had their annual conference in Palm Desert a couple of weeks ago there. Those are fabulous videos if you wanted an introduction or more information, and then some upcoming classes. But I want to tell you that the book you got in your goodie bag on page 64 is the recipe I'm going to make today. But there are a few lucky people out there that might have a little sticker on that page. And if you do, you're going to go home with a lovely door prize. So what a day. You get breakfast, you get lunch, you see wonderful presentations, and I hope you enjoyed breakfast. I brought breakfast today, so hope you enjoyed that. Thank you. And if you're one of the chosen few, you might go home with a can of beans too. You're a winner? You're a winner. All right. Anybody else? 2? Okay. You'll get your prize later, but I just wanted to know there's a sign of life out there. Okay. So, later, yeah. Okay. So, very good. I know you're excited now. So, I also want to talk to you. So, I always in my head, I have like a list running of my favorite food myths or nutrition myths that I like to bust. And I think I'm just kind of on a roll. I was going to do it after I give you food samples, but I think I'm going to do it now because this is my favorite part. So, is anybody afraid of tofu because you've heard it contains estrogen? No, it's okay. No shame. So, this is a question I get a lot, or a statement I hear a lot is, oh, no, I don't do soy. Estrogen. No. So, what I'd like you to know about tofu is it contains something called phytoestrogen, which is different than estrogen. And everybody needs some phytoestrogen in their lives because it is a regulator. If your body currently has too little, it'll help your body produce enough. If your body has too much estrogen from other sources or for whatever reason, phytoestrogen will actually moderate that. So you need it. It's a moderator. Don't avoid tofu because you think, So phytoestrogen and estrogen, 2 different things. Phytoestrogen and tofu, excellent for you. So that's one of my favorites. Here we go, the P word. Anybody know what the P word is? Protein, yeah. So probably the most common question or comment that I get, oh, I can't give up my protein. Oh, what do you do for protein? First of all, do I look like I'm malnourished? A personal note, I was raised as a vegetarian. I grew up with no meat in the household, but we did have dairy. And then when I was in my 40s, I was at a nutrition conference, and I heard a speaker, and for some reason I just had my little epiphany. That was it. I got rid of that, so I've been a vegan or a plant-based eater from my 40s, and I just turned 59. So, been doing this a while. So, well, first of all, does anybody think there's a lot of confusion out there on what you should eat, what you shouldn't eat, how much? So confusing, right? So how do you know what to listen to, who to listen to? Yeah, and by the way, I love engaging. So if you have a question, let me know. Anytime, speak up. We also have microphones if you have a wimpy voice like me. But I'd love to hear your questions. Sure. Hi.
Hi, I'm just curious, what made you change into vegan exactly? What did he say that made you change?
A couple of things. Couple of things really hit home for me. Back to the animal loving part of me. I've always, from my youngest memories, loved and cherished my pets, and always wanted more pets and wanted to rescue this and that. I thought as a vegetarian I really wasn't doing much harm out there. I thought, oh, dairy cows, okay, they eat grass and get milked a couple times a day. What's the problem? Well, I didn't realize, I truly did not know that the dairy industry is where veal cows come from. And I thought, oh my Lord, I am supporting veal, even though I don't eat veal. Dairy cows are artificially inseminated. When they give birth, the calves are taken away from them, and then, I don't want to get too dark here, but you probably have heard veal calves, they get chained in a small dark place until they slaughter them because they don't want them to move and build any muscle and have, tough meat. So I thought, wow, I didn't realize all these years I really had a hand in that. Even though I've never eaten veal. The other thing is inflammation. Dairy, cow's milk, basically it's the growth serum for a baby cow to grow as quickly as possible. There's too much of everything in it. So the result in the human body is that it causes inflammation. Inflammation is linked to so many, many diseases. So those two things were the biggest things that at the conference I just went, wow, okay, I can do better. And that was it. So, maybe someone else had picked up on something else, or it would pick up on something else. But those were the two things that really resonated with me. So, thank you. That was a great question. So, here's a fun fact. So, protein, where does protein come from? Thank you. Yes. Protein, all protein, comes from plants. So why does a cow have protein in it?
Correct.
Because a cow is a vegan that eats plants. So I can go to the middleman, or I can go right to the source. I don't want to feed you grass, but I can do better than that. And take the middleman out of the equation. So protein is an amino acid chain. The animals consume it. Do you ever see labels in the store like 100% organic grass-fed beef? So they're telling you that because that's the best, healthiest diet for that cow. But they want you to buy something that's not as healthy for you, in my opinion, and many others. So think about that. If you're eating an animal, that animal only has protein because he ate plants. So do yourself a favor and skip the middleman. Here's a another thing that never gets talked about, we have so many different sources out there that are telling us you need more protein, more protein, more protein. So the interesting thing is the human body has no way to store protein. So what happens if my body only needs 50 grams of protein a day and I feed it 75 grams of protein? What happens? I can't store it. So my body has two choices. If I'm of low activity, my body can convert it to fat. Or if I am an active person, then my body is just going to release it through my urine. So I just kind of chuckle when I see this push for people, more protein, more protein. The thing is, you only need a certain amount. And if you eat more, you're just flushing it out or it's turning to fat. So that's something we don't really talk about because there's the current push to eat more protein. Some signs if you're eating too much protein: weight gain, digestive issues, constipation. It's not talked about very much. Has anyone ever told you what happens if you eat too much protein? I feel like most of the sources out there for us are telling us to eat more protein. But if I can't store it, why would I eat more? Just something to think about. If we were to put that same focus on protein on fiber, high fiber foods, most people's systems everything would fall into place perfectly. I just read a study last week. 97% of men do not get enough fiber, and 90% of women. So if we increase our fiber, which would mean more plants, I think if we focused on that, we would get all the protein that we need. Just saying. And here's one of my favorites. So one of the rock stars of the plant-based world is a physician named Dr. Michael Greger. And I'm going to paraphrase one of his famous quotes for you. So I used to use this one a lot, and then I embarrassed myself in front of him. So I used to say, oh, everything in moderation. It's okay. I don't eat this very often. Everything in moderation. And his quote is that, well, sure, everything is fine in moderation, just as long as you're okay with moderate amounts of heart disease, and moderate amounts of cancer, and moderate amounts of diabetes. You okay with just a little bit of that? Okay. All right, then just go ahead and have a little bit of whatever. So I stopped using that phrase. There was also a lot of info floating around saying, people were telling me, I can't be vegan because of my blood type. So it turns out there were some naturopaths quite a few years back that he created this diet that was based on a person's blood type. So it hasn't happened recently, but I used to get all these people coming to me and say, oh, that looks wonderful, but I can't do it because I'm O positive or whatever. And I'd say, what? So it looks like nobody here has fallen for that one. But according to the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition and at least 16 other peer-reviewed studies, there is no evidence to validate this theory. Hogwash. So another thing is some people approach me and they say, well, yeah, this looks good, but it's just a fad. Being a vegan, that's a fad. Because we all know there was the no carb, the low fat, the keto, the zillions of things that come and go over the years. But when somebody tells me that they think this is a fad, I say, how about the blue zones? Blue zones are places where people have been eating this way for hundreds of years. That's not a fad. That's a healthy way of life that is going to be around long after we're gone. So it's not a fad. It's just the world is just becoming aware, just learning about it. So if you think this is a fad, think of the blue zones. And I use that word because I find that most people are familiar with them. Is there anybody that maybe not? Okay, we're good. All right. Does anybody think they should avoid gluten? Okay. So gluten kind of became a dirty word, but the only people that should avoid gluten, in my opinion, are people that have celiac disease. That's about 1% of the population. So gluten, what is gluten? Gluten, it is. Somebody there said protein. Yeah, so if you take a wheat kernel and you take everything away, what's left is the gluten, and that's the protein, the concentrated protein of wheat. So people with celiac disease cannot, their systems cannot tolerate it, but it's very rare. The rest of us, it happens to be a wonderful source of protein for us. Good question.
When you're talking about gluten and vegan, I lived in France for a year, and I ate things that we're not supposed to eat here. But it was how we process our food. Do you feel that's important, and what parts of processing are important?
Well, in general, the least amount of processing is ideal when we eat something. And yes, we have an overabundance of overprocessed food, particularly in this country. So when you're lucky enough to travel, you will also find, you'll often find that in other countries, those differences, you'll really notice those differences. So yes, I totally agree that, the least amount of processing, the better. The ideal diet, plant-based, I eat the plant-based way. But the ideal setup would be whole foods plant-based, which means very little processed stuff. So yes, that's a great point. I know some people that don't tolerate bread here may tolerate bread in France better, something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Question, sorry. I have a question about, there are a lot of plant amalgams that imitate, there are lots of plant-based foods that
Yes.
imitate beef, like Beyond Burgers, Impossible Burgers,
Yes.
Steffi C. Can you talk a little bit about the processing of some of those, and how does that, is that processing different, or should we avoid things that are pre-made like that?
That's a great question. So yes, I mentioned earlier, there's never been a better time to eat this way. There are so many products out there. But Stephen mentions the things that are made to cook and act like meat that some people would normally eat. I look at those foods as wonderful transition foods. I don't look at them as something that you should incorporate into your diet and eat every single day. But if you're someone that's trying to eat less meat, I say go for it. Use those products because they will leave you feeling satisfied with something that is very similar to what you were hungry for. Use them. They are fabulous transition tools. But yes, it takes a lot to make a soybean or a piece of wheat. It takes several steps. But are they full of garbage? For the most part, no. There's one really well-known brand that's recently cleaned their ingredients up a bit more. So read labels. always read labels. It shouldn't have a paragraph of that thick. And know what's in there. If there are things in there that you can't pronounce and you've never seen before, you probably want to leave that one on the shelf. Another question? Sure.
Hi, I was wondering about protein subject again.
Yeah.
How do we know if we're getting enough protein with the vegan diet? Because they're always saying that seniors aren't getting enough. And especially, I'm wondering about if you're an active senior, how much you would need.
So, couple of things. One, there's a very interesting study that you can read on nutritionfacts.org that's up there. It is specifically about seniors and the amount of protein they need. So this study looked at a very large group of seniors, and they found that a high amount of protein consumption led to an earlier death with this group. A reduction in protein consumption as they aged led to a longer life and a better quality of health. That's a new study that's up there. I'm just saying, check it out if that interests you. But back to, how do I know? How do I know if I'm getting enough? If you're fairly in tune with your body, listen to your body. Do you feel good? Do you have energy? Do you, are you ready to go hit the tennis court or whatever? If you feel good, you're getting enough. And if you really focus on the fiber, the whole foods, those things have all the protein you need, and you're giving yourself the fiber as well, which most of us don't get enough of. So I would say listen to your body. But that can be tricky too, because like I said, some of the signs of too much protein, constipation, a little sluggishness. So if you feel good, you're probably doing just right. And you can experiment. If you're someone that, you want to be methodical about it, maybe keep a 5-day diary and just experiment a little bit. Be a pain because you'll have to figure out, how much protein is in all the different things you eat, but it's helpful. But just remember, the plants are where all the protein comes from. So if you eat plants, you're gonna get enough without really having to count or worry about it. So that's my advice, is listen to your body. And the other thing is get your blood work done every year. If your blood work is good, you're doing a great job. If your cholesterol is high, if your blood sugar is high, eat more plants. If you eat 100% plant-based diet, you're not going to have to worry about those things. So, another question.
Yes. A question for you. What do you think about products like Impossible Burger?
Yeah, so we were just talking about that a little bit. I think they're great tools to use to help you transition. Or to maybe get through an awkward dinner with your carnivore friends that you go out to eat with. That way you don't have to order a lettuce leaf or ice cubes. But they have a purpose. I don't believe that eating a burger every day is probably a great idea, but I do think those are fantastic transition tools. The nice thing about them is if, I don't know, maybe you make your great grandmother's spaghetti bolognese every Sunday. It's a tradition. You can throw that product into your recipe and use it the same way. So it's a great tool to help you start to eat less of that. And then ultimately, ideally, it would just be a once in a while thing. Yeah, I'll go ahead and name names. So just Steve was asking, like Beyond products, there's Beyond, there's Impossible. Beyond just cleaned up their ingredients a little bit. So, worth a try. I think they're great because they really help people wean themselves off meat. Hi.
Hi. what's your opinion between frozen vegetables and fresh?
That's a great question. So I personally believe that there are times when one is better than the other. So really depends what I'm making. But I can tell you that I always keep a stash of things in my freezer, like frozen organic corn, peas, things like that. They still hold their nutrition, just like the fresh ones. And they're not perishable. They're really handy to just pull them out for a recipe. So yeah, berries, veggies, most of them freeze really well, and they keep most of their nutrition intact. So sometimes the texture will change a little bit on it, so it just kind of depends what it is. But it's a nice way to have things that, when fresh is not in season, like corn. You know, in the middle of winter, you want corn, some frozen corns. You know, it's there for you. So I think it's great. Yeah, go ahead.
I once read about this man that had AIDS, and he decided to change his diet for health reasons. But he not only became vegan, he became what was called a raw food vegan, and he's supposedly seroconverted. Have you heard anything about those kinds of studies?
Yeah, so going the raw food route that's a big step. It's always, to me personally, felt like a little bit too much. I already feel like I have enough work with the way I eat, but I do know some people that thrive and love eating that way.
So we're going to move ahead to the cooking demonstration and question. Is it all right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, be good.
So we stay on schedule.
Yes. So, Shannon, stop talking so much. And we're good. Okay. So, I'm going to make a tuna salad substitute. And someone at my last presentation said, well, if it's not made with tuna, why do you call it tuna salad? Well, I'm calling it tuna salad so that you know what to do with it. You know how to use it. What I'm going to make is fabulous for sandwiches, for snacks with maybe a cracker or vegetable sticks. It just has a lot of different ways. A tuna melt on some grilled rye bread would be delicious. So those are the kinds of things. You could do a stuffed tomato. I could go on and on. But I'm just going to show you. It's really easy. It's really healthy. It is made with whole foods. Okay. So you can make it by hand with a good knife and cutting board, but if you have a food processor, it makes it so much easier. The first thing I'm going to do is take some carrots. And I just cut them into chunks to make my work a little easier on my ancient food processor here. I'm hoping he keeps hanging in there for a few more years. So carrots are really the base of this. And I chose carrots because the star of the show are garbanzo beans. And garbanzo beans are soft and they can get mushy. And I don't want a mushy texture in my end result. So I'm going to take these carrots and I'm just going to grind them down. Okay, so they're just tiny little pieces. And what they're going to do is give our dish some body. And it's going to be very beautiful and colorful. So one of the things I also wanted to share with you is when you eat, I'm assuming that even if you're a diehard carnivore, that you occasionally have some kind of plant on your dinner plate. Do yourself a favor and use colorful plants and vary the plants that you eat. The interesting thing is that the different colors in plants represent the different vitamins and minerals that are present in that plant. So you can take just an ordinary bell pepper, and I think it's fascinating. So a red bell pepper and a green bell pepper, they come from the same plant. That red bell pepper has about 10 times the antioxidants of a green pepper. So vary your colors. If you're someone that goes to, the grocery store every Monday and you buy a head of iceberg lettuce and one green bell pepper and one banana, mix it up. Get something that's a different color next time. Do your body a favor because you'll be giving it some different nutrients.
What did you add?
So I just added to my carrot mixture some diced celery, so a little bit of diced sweet onion, and then some diced pickles. So who likes sweet pickles? How about dill pickles? Okay, I got you covered. I have both in here. So those I chopped by hand, but now I'm going to put the processor to work again. So I just have some garbanzo beans, organic ones from Trader Joe's, and the important thing is to rinse them really well.
Why is that?
Why?
Because the beans sit on the store shelf, and over time, let's call it bean sludge, starts to occur. Yeah, it gets like a thick, syrupy consistency at the bottom of the can. So rinse all that away so that they're not covered in sludge. Nothing wrong with it, but it's just going to make your end result mushy and yeah, yucky. Thank you. Technical word. So I'm going to do these in 2 batches so I don't overdo it, but you just kind of pulse a couple of times. If I over process these beans, it makes another dish.
Anybody know?
Hummus, yeah. So I've got to pay attention here. So probably like 3. Yep, that's all it took. So if you don't overdo it, you end up with some beans that sort of have a flaked texture. All right, see how easy that is? 1 can of beans, organic beans, a couple dollars. Just throw in a few fresh basic veggies that you probably already have on hand. And this will feed you for a couple of days. You can do a lot of different things with it. Oops. And it's really, really good for you. I might be a little biased, but I think it tastes pretty good too. All right, just gonna mix it up a little bit, and then I'm gonna add a big blob of mustard. Give it some tanginess. No, any kind of mustard is fine. If you prefer Dijon, you could do that as well. But I like the plain old, I don't know, like now you call it sunshine mustard. Yellow mustard. I'm going to add just some sprinkles of garlic powder. And also some onion, granulated onion or onion powder. And then a healthy amount of black pepper. And now I'm going to add some plant-based mayo. This is one of my favorite brands, so if you're transitioning, don't throw away everything you have and buy all things you're unfamiliar with. But if you're interested in trying this, go item by item. If you just ran out of mayonnaise, try a plant-based mayonnaise next time. This is Best Foods, popular brand. It's out there. A couple of years ago, it used to be called vegan mayonnaise. It now says plant-based mayo.
What's it made with?
It's, well, mayo is plants, yeah. Mayo is vinegar and oil and initially eggs whipped. But this is vinegar and oil or seasonings without the eggs. Eggs are not an essential ingredient in making mayonnaise, so yeah, doesn't need the eggs, so why throw them in there? So,
Question, sure.
yeah.
Yeah, the black pepper, is that, I hear this good for you because it's got selenium in it, and that helps with cancer prevention, maybe that's a myth.
Selenium, I don't know. I'm not sure. Great question, but I know what I'm gonna look up right at home. Not familiar with that one. But I do know that if you have turmeric in your life, if you're taking that for anti-inflammatory benefits, some black pepper helps activate it. It's beneficial. So while I'm stirring this, we mentioned the mayonnaise made without eggs. So an interesting story about eggs. So if you have access to any old, like maybe grandma's recipes or something like that, many recipes from the past did not contain eggs. And I'm talking about cakes and cookies and things that we almost always put eggs in nowadays. So it turns out before the war, most people did not cook with eggs, unless maybe perhaps you lived in a rural area, you had a farm, you had chickens. But if you were a city dweller, eggs were not, on every corner like they are now. And they were expensive, so they weren't something that the average person had in their fridge. But then the wars came along, and they were trying to figure out different ways, cost-effective ways to feed the troops that were overseas. So one of the things they discovered is that they could use eggs and dry them into powdered eggs and ship them to the war zones. The cooks could rehydrate them. If you ever watched MASH, that show, I remember one of the standing things was, oh God, more powdered eggs. But the eggs came into use during the war. So then the war ended, and the government had this huge egg, assembly line up and running. So what to do with all of that? Just shut it down? Well, they decided to teach the American public that we needed to use eggs. And then Betty Crocker came along with her cookbook. And what do you know? Eggs started going into cakes and cookies and breads. And before we knew it, a couple of decades later, I think most people that I come across think that an egg is an essential ingredient in a cake. Right? Most of us have that thought. Turns out you don't need it. It doesn't serve a purpose. And one of the interesting things, so many interesting things in my life, you actually have to do things to that cake mix to make sure your cake doesn't taste like you're eating fried steak. You've got to add vanilla or lemon or something that'll keep you from tasting that egg. So it was put there so that we would start using eggs. It's not an essential ingredient. So if you, yeah, it's true. So learning to cook without things, you can probably make many of the things you're used to and just eliminate those ingredients. By the way, I live here locally. If any of you would like, if you have questions, if you have a family recipe, you're trying to figure out how to veganize it, I want to be part of your support network. I tried very hard to answer all emails within 24 hours. Please, my email address is where? Oh, you have the book? So there you can figure out how to reach me through the book. But please don't hesitate. I love getting questions. I love helping people in that way. My mission is to get people to eat more plants and realize it's not a sacrifice, but it's an introduction to all kinds of new and exciting things. So, any of you enjoyed the tuna sample?
Yeah, it was good. Very good. Very good.
So you just had it as a snack with some crackers and vegetable sticks, but it's pretty fabulous on some toasted rye bread with some lettuce, maybe a little more pickle in there. But it's a very basic starter recipe. In the book Thinking About It Today, I use it 2 ways. I use it as we just made it today for sandwiches, etc. But I also have a tuna pasta salad in there. So it makes a really nice hearty meal if you mix it, stir this mixture into some pasta.
Questions.
Sure.
So, I don't know if everybody can hear me, I don't work with my kids. Okay. So, what is your go-to can't live without item in the kitchen? And it could be a food item or a gadget, or a spice. What is the one thing you can't live without in the kitchen?
I can't live without vinegar. I use it in so many things. I didn't even have to really think too hard. Rice vinegar, seasoned rice vinegar, oh my gosh, everything. Yes, I use it in my guacamole instead of lime juice. I use it in every sauce, everything. I have cider vinegar, I have so many vinegars, but I use them all the time. Was there?
I made this recipe.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh.
I added lemon because I always put lemon in my tuna salad.
Oh, okay.
So.
Yeah, great add-on. First of all, is it make it your own?
And then I crushed up nori, and it gave it that
Yes.
fish taste.
So people that want it to taste more fish-like, you can use chopped up, crushed up nori. Nori is the seaweed wrapper that we use to roll sushi, and it has a fishiness to it because it comes from the sea. And a lot of people will add it to make it taste a little fishy. It's also great with fresh herbs, like maybe some fresh dill or tarragon. But yeah, make it your own. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Thank you so much, you guys. I really enjoyed being here.
How about it for Chef Jimmy Bush? That was yum yum. Hey, I did have one more question. When you substitute egg,
Yes.
what do you substitute with? Because you need to have something. In a recipe like a cake mix or a bread mix. So what do you substitute?
It depends what you're making, but usually with a cake mix, you don't need it, but you'll need to replace the moisture that egg.
Some more oil.
No, well, we want to avoid the oil, but you could use applesauce.
Kind of good.
You could use some flaxseed in water.
You had me at applesauce. Let's hear it again for Chef Shannon Bush. That was delish. That was your appetizer. Because it's time for
Taylor, and this is the 10th year of doing the Positively Aging Provider. I'm really excited. And also the 5th anniversary, the 10th anniversary of Park, which started at the same time. So this started as the reunion project many years ago. Some of you may have been there. During COVID, we went virtual and got a lot of community partners and made it a true community collaboration. So we're really excited about today. This year, we're going to do something a little different. We're not going to talk about research studies per se, but what the research that's been coming out means to those of us living with HIV. So we've got a great group of providers here, and we're going to kind of just pick their brains, get their opinions, and we want plenty of time at the end for you to ask your questions about the research project. So without further ado, I'm going to ask, and I'll start down at the end with Kathy, about what the most exciting new research development for the past year has been for you, in your opinion. Because you're not just a researcher, but you're also a clinician as well. So that's working for Gilead.
Correct. So thanks, Jeff. So let me briefly introduce myself for those of you that don't know me. My name is Kathy Chen. I am a physician internist by training. And years ago, I had a deep interest in working with the HIV community, and I did an HIV fellowship with AIDS Healthcare Foundation in Los Angeles, which is where I live. And then went on to work as a full-time clinician in downtown Los Angeles at AHF for about 11 years, taking care of, our clinic was mostly, we were Skid Row adjacent, so we took care of a largely, unhoused, unstably housed population of people living with HIV, wonderful population, hugely satisfying, taking care of those individuals. And then about 11 and a half years ago, it seems like a long time, I left full-time clinical practice and I joined Gilead Sciences, where I work full-time now. So I'm currently in a role, I'm the regional medical expert, senior director for Gilead Sciences, covering the west region of the country, so the entire West Coast. I still am a clinician at heart, as Jeff knows, and so shortly after joining Gilead, I started volunteering 1 day a week, so I still see individuals living with HIV as well as individuals who benefit from PrEP at AIDS Project Los Angeles, or APLA clinic in LA, obviously. So that's my background, and now to get to Jeff's question about kind of what's exciting in research today. I think we've come such a long way with how we treat and manage HIV, both treatment and prevention, over the past 4 decades, right? So I think that part is really exciting, and we reached a point where it's not just, somebody comes in newly diagnosed, let's say, for treatment, and, back in the day, we kind of had one option, one obvious option that we would offer them, maybe two that they could choose between. And then if we get into, further along, let's say they develop resistance to that regimen and they're coming in now for their second regimen, oftentimes then we really only have one option to choose from, and we're really limited, right, in those early years. And so I think where we are today is really already very exciting, that we have so many options, right? Like as someone newly diagnosed walking into a clinic today for the first time seeking treatment, not only do we have single tablet regimens, right? Again, very different from the early days when I first started treating, where it was multiple pills multiple times a day. So not only can they take one pill once a day as their complete regimen, but they even have a choice of, do you want this one pill once a day option or this one pill? And so even within that, there's choices. So I think that's really exciting for where we are today. And then for what's coming and what research continues to fuel is more choices and more optionality. So now it's not just one pill once a day, but what about, and some of you are probably familiar, there's already a product approved for treatment that's an injectable regimen, right? So you could come in every 2 months and get your maintenance medication for HIV treatment. And then you don't have to take pills every day. There's obviously a lot of benefits to that for some people, to not have to take pills daily. Whether it's, struggling with adherence of taking pills every day, or the stigma of having to open a bottle and take a pill every day. So that already is a huge innovation. And where we're moving is more of those options. So imagine maybe what you prefer. I don't like needles, so I don't want this injectable. But what if we could offer you a 1 pill once a month option? Or, injections every 6 months. So yeah, you don't like needles, but what if it was only twice a year? And, so I think that's what's exciting for what's coming, is that we're just making that menu of options bigger and broader and covering more modalities, so you don't have to swallow a pill or take an injection. There's just going to be a lot more choice. So I think that optionality is what excites me. And that's just treatment. Obviously in the prevention space too, starting in 2012, we had our first medication for PrEP, for prevention, 1 pill once a day. A lot of people struggled with taking a preventative pill every day, right? So now we also have on the market approved an injection every 2 months. We have an injection every 6 months for PrEP that's already, available. So what's down the road, for that? Again, what about maybe a monthly oral regimen for prevention? What about a yearly injectable option for prevention? So this sort of menu of choices, whether you're coming in for treatment or prevention, where it's not one size fits all. I think we've realized that. We haven't ended the HIV epidemic because it's absolutely not one size fits all. So we need to continue to innovate to, create options to fit all of the, needs of the people who could benefit.
Great, thank you for that. So James, as somebody who sees patients every day, all day, and I've been in the game for a long time now, what's changed for you and your patients? What are you most excited about?
What changes have been most exciting for patients?
Yeah, in the past year.
Yeah, for me. So hi everyone, I'm James Adams. I have been doing HIV care for over 20 years, 25 years. I started learning in residency or medical school, but I started really focusing on HIV after residency. I did a fellowship in HIV at UCSD Owen Clinic, and I learned a lot from all the guys there. It's just an amazing place. And then I actually stepped into the jail system for 9 years. I don't really know how I hooked up with that, but I did.
We won't talk about what got you there.
Yeah, so I was a jail doctor for 9 years, almost 10, and then I got tired of the bars and the concrete, and I wanted to get back out in the community. So, but I had a lot of brushing up to do because a lot had changed those 8 or 9 years, like between 2003 and like 2012 on new drugs. So I actually ended up getting several different jobs, but I landed finally at AHF, and that's how I know Kathy. Kathy and I have known each other since 2012-ish, I think, 2010, something like that. Anyway, so Kathy, Dr. Chen worked at the downtown clinic, and I worked in the Beverly Hills clinic. So a little bit different clientele, but kind of the same in some ways, I'm sure. But yeah, I learned so much from. We had such a good crew at AHF back in those days, and we were, I guess, a bit of bad apples as well.
We don't have time for
So anyhow, through another series of jobs, I ended up here about 5 years ago, and I've had actually the unique experience of working at 3 different organizations already in town. So I kind of see the differences in care from environments like Eisenhower to Kaiser, Permanente, and now at Desert Oasis. It's nice to be in a community where it's so enriched with great minds and from activist to patient to doctor. It's just nice to be in a community that is so empowered and does things like this to socialize, to get to know each other better, and to be able to lean on each other. I think it's a very collegial atmosphere here, which is nice. So I'm sorry, back to your question. I just wanted to introduce myself, but back to your question, what has been the most exciting developments for me? Right. I think Dr. Chen summarized it beautifully. I don't really have much more to add to that. I think there's a lot of stuff that's also very exciting, like how do we cure this? How do we get rid of it? And so there's a lot of exciting new research going on with CRISPR therapy, and not quite ready to roll out to the masses yet. But I feel like the technology is getting there to where we're learning how to wake up the reservoir and kill that virus and hopefully eradicate it once we get it down, and because it's not perfect science yet, because the targets sometimes overlap with other targets that you need in your bodily processes, but it's exciting. We never thought that we would cure this, and along with all of the therapies that Kathy Chuck touched on, I think it's very exciting to have multiple options, because our community is so varied. It's a motley crew of individuals, who have different needs, and I definitely have a segment of my patient population that's just tired of taking pills, so it's nice to have those options, injectable options for people, as well as some of the newer dosing strategies of of getting, tooth pull therapy once a week or once every 2 weeks or once a month. So very exciting. So yeah, that's a long answer to your question.
Thank you, that's perfect. And you mentioned cure. We're not going to delve into cure research today because coming up on World AIDS Day, this is the day before, on November 30th, we are going to be doing a program, it'll be our fourth annual, Timothy Ray Brown, who many of you may remember lived in the community, the first person cured of HIV. In his honor, we do a World AIDS Day presentation on research. HARP works very closely with one of 10 NIH funded, and we are still funded. I'm very happy to say. We didn't know for a while if they were going to continue funding them, so fingers crossed it stays that way. These Cure Research Consortia, we're paired up with one of them called Really HIV, based at La Jolla, at the Scripps Institute in La Jolla. And so you'll hear a lot more about cure research then. But you mentioned CRISPR, and that's been in the news a lot. I actually had a friend in Florida text me today saying, I saw this on Facebook, there's a cure for HIV. Well, no, there's not. How many times have we heard this in the last 40-some years? So don't stop taking your medicines just yet. But what is exciting is, as you mentioned, those gene therapy strategies. They're trying to do what happened to Timothy Ray Brown, Paul Edmonds, the City of Hope patient, that should also recreate their cures without having to go through a bone marrow or stem cell transplant that they have to give to people who are, at the end of the rope when it comes to their cancer treatment. This was done in people who had cancer. And so now they're looking at the rest of us who are just living with HIV, well controlled, taking better and better regimens over the years to see if they can replicate that using gene therapy. City of Hope just down the road is doing a really great trial that's enrolling now. If you're interested, come to me. UC San Diego is enrolling that study, and they're making great progress. So, stay tuned. We're making progress. CRISPR hasn't been done in humans yet, but will be soon, at least in HIV. So, we keep saying it's about 10 years out. It has to be 10 years if we're there yet, but we are making progress, and fortunately, knock on wood, the funding is still continuing, so we're grateful for that. So with that, we'll turn to Sarah, who is a registered dietitian, to tell us a little about your background, and what's exciting for you in terms of what you're able to do for people living with HIV.
Absolutely. So yes, my name's Sarah. I'm a registered dietitian and also a certified diabetes educator. My background, I started out, inpatient, working in hospitals. So obviously, patients who were very ill, acutely ill, but then moved on to work in dialysis. So diabetes and kidney disease are a couple of interest areas for me. But now I work at Desert Oasis, and I manage the health education department there. So I head up a team of dietitians, nurses, and health coaches who essentially help educate our Desert Oasis population on all kinds of things. We're just, really interested in doing anything we can to help everyone live their best lives, whether that's smoking cessation, intentional weight loss, intentional weight gain, cancer, you name it, malnutrition. So I see a wide variety of patients in outpatient setting now. And I would say for me, I'm gonna go kind of adjacent here as far as medications, and because we know, of course, when you look at the wider US population, most people don't necessarily, unfortunately, have just one disease state potentially going on. We've got multiple things happening. And we know diabetes is a huge one of those. I'm really interested, obviously, in the last few years. Many of you may have heard of these brand name medications like Wegovy or Zepbound. These medications were originally developed to help with diabetes, once a week injectable, under the names Ozempic. So there's a lot of names for these things, but Ozempic and Mounjaro. So several different names, but actually just two different medications. And so obviously those have gotten very popular. I'm working with a lot of patients who are using those, and what I'm interested more specifically for everyone, but also specifically as it goes back to the HIV population, is I get lots of referrals for something I just mentioned, which was either a lot of people wanting to intentionally lose weight, if you will, and sometimes the opposite. Sometimes people whose body weight is a little too low, maybe they have an illness or some situation, and they need to intentionally gain some weight. But I like to tell my patients when we use those terms, they're not very descriptive. And so what I'm excited about with some of these medications, and when, in fact, there's probably an oral version of some of these medications due out in the next year or so. And I think one thing I like is that it shined more of a spotlight on body composition. So when we say weight loss, what does that mean? I like to have a conversation with people. Now, there are some scales that are sort of starting to do this, but normally when we step on a normal scale, it just gives us a number, right? Just one number. And that number does not necessarily tell us much about what is the makeup of the number. So when I step on a scale, it shows me a number, but I don't necessarily know how much of that number is adipose tissue, which is a fancy word for fat cells, and how much is muscle, how much is bone, water, etc. And that's actually a really important thing to know, because I got 2 clients, 2 women who both weigh 150 pounds, but their body composition is very different, and they're gonna look very different. One time I was at a community event, and we had a guy who was a personal trainer step on our scale, and we calculated his BMI, and it said he was overweight, almost obese. But of course, the guy was all muscle, you could bounce quarters off of him. So that's why I just always like to discuss body composition. And I think it's going to be interesting. We know one problem with these medications is they can cause a lot of weight loss, which is great for helping with fatty liver, with inflammation, those kinds of things that contribute to a lot of disease processes. And there's kind of a whole role with that, even with some of the HIV medications and therapies. Obviously, that's too big to go. I won't get into that now, but there's a relationship there. But anyway, I'm excited that with some of these medications, they're also starting to look at things that would hopefully address the fact that with some of them, there's a lot of muscle loss happening. So I spend a lot of my day counseling people. How can we lose weight in a healthy, safe way and maintain our muscle? And that's something that I like to spread the message on.
And the new drugs actually do cause more muscle loss in addition to, what's going on with them.
It depends on how you do it. That's why you want to see your registered dietitian and talk about how much protein should I be eating and what can I do to try to, kind of mitigate that. But what's exciting down the road for me is that potential medications that will actually address some of that both, where they might help someone gain muscle mass if they need to, or at least maintain their muscle mass while they're losing fat mass instead of just losing weight.
And one question, and this may be too much of the weeds, but we already have drugs like Symposium that do promote muscle mass. Back in the day, they prescribed those steroids. And then for people with visceral adiposity, like we see a lot in HIV, there's a drug called Grifta that people use to help keep that fat down. So what's your experience with any of those?
I don't have a ton of specific experience with those necessarily, but I do know, and maybe one of you guys can know a little more about this or can speak to it a little more, that again, with some of the GLP-1s, they are looking at combination. I think there's at least one trial going on with tirzepatide maybe, and some of those things. But I can't speak to those ones specifically.
I have a little bit of experience prescribing a Grifta. I think it's a good option to have for patients who are concerned about their lipo dystrophy, whether it's belly fat or we don't see these as much anymore. Kathy, but buffalo hump, lipoatrophy. There's some facial reconstruction techniques and injections in the face that you can use. But the problem with the Grifta, and I think there's going to be a once-a-week formulation coming out if it's not out already, is that it's a daily injectable, and so that's kind of tough to do it daily.
Yeah, it's still daily for now.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe in the pipeline or something. We got to look at sure. And then in terms of Serostim, I don't really prescribe that a lot anymore. I actually don't have any patients on it. I don't think currently. But I'm actually glad you mentioned it, Jeff, because I probably have a couple patients that could be on it. So I don't think of it as much anymore, Serostim. So, but yeah, that's growth hormone basically for someone who has a diagnosis of wasting, which is clinically a body mass index under 19? 19 or 20?
19.9.
Yeah, so basically it's, low body mass index, someone who's very sort of underweight, and who might benefit health-wise from having added muscle mass.
And then what about anabolic steroids? Besides testosterone replacement, do you still use things like DECA or Xandrin or any of those?
No, for patients needing testosterone therapy, I pretty much am limited to just testosterone.
Yeah.
I haven't prescribed DECA in 10 years. I don't even know if it's available anymore, actually. What's that?
Compounded, I don't think it's...
Okay. But yeah, usually topical or injectable testosterone, and I think some people are starting to prescribe a sub-Q testosterone, which is supposedly a little bit more constant absorption versus an IM. So I actually haven't prescribed testosterone sub-Q, but I think it is an option for patients if you're not getting a good steady flow of testosterone, usually by having your labs checked. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So we're talking about not just HIV. Obviously, the drugs work well in terms of viral suppression, and we're getting better and better regimens. But that's the least of our problems these days for most of us, right? We're looking around with some gray hair in the audience and here on the stage, and so we're dealing with aging comorbidities and other problems that Sarah was alluding to. So I was wondering, kind of, what are the biggest challenges you're seeing in patients you see and treat when it comes to other things besides the HIV? So Kathy, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? It's a good problem to have, right? People are living with HIV today. They're not dying from it. So again, in the early years, we were just happy to get someone on a regimen that could get them suppressed and buy them some time till the next new drug came out or whatnot. But now we're looking at long-term health, right? When we make decisions, even that 30-year-old new patient coming in that we're starting on treatment, we're thinking, what's the best option for this individual now? Because barring finding a cure, we know that for now we have really good medications that can suppress the virus, but they're necessary lifelong, right? So we want to use drugs that have the lowest, negative impact on the body, whether we're talking about weight changes or metabolic, cholesterol, glucose, risk of diabetes, effect on the bone, kidneys, all of that. We want drugs that have sort of the cleanest profile because we want to be able to get the job done, get the virus suppressed, but allow that individual to live otherwise unaffected, right, from the medication. And we're getting better at that. I think our newer agents are cleaner in all of those ways that I've said. But there's still the aging process, which unfortunately every one of us, with or without HIV in this room, is dealing with aging. And so with aging comes comorbidity. So now you're managing, I feel like in most of my patients, controlling the HIV is the easy part. It's much harder to control the diabetes and the cholesterol and some of those other weight and things like that, and hypertension. So, really being able to tightly manage what we can manage of those comorbidities, again, to set people up for lifelong health. And then I think what's been challenging for me is that I'm an internist by training. I don't have any specialty training in geriatrics. And, I was starting to see, especially when I was in full-time practice, many of my patients were in their 60s, 70s, and I think there's frailty, there's, the psychosocial impact of aging, of losing, support network, isolation, things like that. And I didn't necessarily feel that I was the expert at dealing with those things, or that I had, the resources to provide support for all of those things. Having Sarah there would have been amazing, just to have the support of someone who could help with nutrition, counseling, and things like that. But all those other things, I think that when you look at the whole person and taking them through aging and aging gracefully, which is what we're seeing now, I think that's probably the biggest challenge that's going to be facing us, right? People talk about the silver tsunami of HIV, right? Everyone's aging. Again, like I said, this is a good problem to have, but we need a better understanding from a research perspective, better understanding of what's different about aging with HIV. We know earlier on that comorbidities tended to happen at about a decade earlier for people living with HIV. HIV than people without HIV. And that had to do with this, chronic inflammation that happens in the body from mostly untreated HIV. Back in the day when we used to watch and wait and allow people's CD4 counts to start going down, all that time of leaving the virus untreated was causing inflammation that was also then leading to earlier onset of these comorbidities. So thankfully we know better now, right? We know we start people on treatment as soon as possible. We try and get them suppressed and keep them suppressed for their whole life. So we're closing those gaps, but we're still seeing those comorbidities happen earlier. So I think there's more research that can be done to really understand the aging process in people that were HIV. From the research perspective, from the clinical perspective, I think it's really around having the workforce of, at the healthcare provider, healthcare center level to be able to support the whole process of aging.
Thank you. Certainly, here in Palm Springs, it's very unique that we have such a large population who moved here, but people living with HIV who are now getting older. They call it God's waiting room for people with HIV. So as someone practicing here in Palm Springs in that unique environment, you want to drill down a little deeper and tell us, what are the most common things that you need to address in your patients, James?
So like Kathy was saying, definitely managing all the comorbidities with getting older, managing the hypertension, high blood pressure can be kind of challenging sometimes. Kind of ensuring that your patients with HIV are taking statins. Basically, just about everyone with HIV should probably be on a statin based on the Reprieve study results. Lowering adverse cardiovascular events by 39%, 40%, I believe. And also just managing all the new diabetes medications. Sarah's right, these new medications are amazing. You get people that are losing 30, 50 pounds who can completely turn around their diabetes with these miraculous drugs. But of course they have, these patients need to be counseled properly on how to take these medications and how to eat on these medications, because you can't just eat the same, or you're gonna feel sick. And then there's all this controversy surrounding, what's happening with the Ozempic patients or the Mounjaro patients with possible eye side effects from the therapy, causing problems with your eyes or Ozempic face, or just certain things about those medications that we're finding could be affecting people in some ways. So
it's kind of ironic that it's much like the effects of HIV drugs back in the day, right? So.
Yeah, a little bit. And then I read some article this morning about its effect on the vulva in women. So yeah, there's all this kind of stuff that GLP-1s can be doing. And I think other challenges for me clinically also are, we have these great technologies. We have these cute every 2 to 6 month injectable drugs, but not all patients qualify because of their insurance or their healthcare network, or it's difficult sometimes unless you've got really fancy PPO insurance, or at a facility like Desert AIDS Project at IDAP Health, where you've got Ryan White in place. It can be challenging getting these medications approved for patients. So the practicality of rolling out these new meds is just to be determined. And then other challenges, of course, that I face with patients, I think Kathy touched on it a little bit, was when people get older, especially if they aren't partnered or they're not married, loneliness can become a factor. And their partners and husbands or wives, spouses can become old too, and so they're sort of becoming the caregiver in that relationship, and that can be very taxing for that particular patient too, who's struggling with their own, chronic illnesses. So life just gets complicated the older you get, you just don't want to fall. That's your biggest thing, right? You don't want to fall and break it up, because that'll really take you, it'll really age you tremendously. I've seen it in my parents and my patients too. And so we got to take care of our bones, have your doctor or provider check your DEXA scans, your bone mineral density scans, because the medications that we've used for HIV could have been potentially toxic to the bones. So understanding all of those comorbidities and all the challenges that come with taking these drugs over 20 plus years, I think is important. And then all the other stuff, social stuff too, with the increased risk of alcoholism and drug addiction, substance use disorder rather. And I think that's very, very much a problem in our community here. I have some patients who struggle with dipping back into the party scene, or because of loneliness or whatever it is that draws them back into that drug. And what I'm talking about is, crystal meth can really just kind of take people under, and also the depression and anxiety in our community right now with what's going on politically. I mean, that's tough to manage. A lot of patients who are suffering from anxiety, just from the atmosphere in our country right now. So, yeah, it's a lot to manage sometimes. It can be overwhelming, but we do the best we can and try to make it. Try to sit one-on-one with the patient, really try to listen and come up with the best plan for that particular person.
And it's getting harder and harder to do in today's healthcare plan. And let's get to the next question. So hold that thought. So Sarah, where you said as a dietitian, how do you help patients address the issues that we were just talking about, the aging, the comorbidities, so hypertension, cardiovascular disease, cholesterol, bone mineral density, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So, as a dietitian, obviously we talked a lot about medications kind of up here. Obviously, as a dietitian, I often get asked about supplements all the time. And one thing I like to use, and I know it's a tired example, but what I like to tell people is that you've heard the whole thing that if I have a beautiful, wonderful house, very expensive house, but it's built on a really shaky, poor foundation, it doesn't matter how great the building materials for the house are, we've still got a huge problem, right? And so the thing I like, and I'm glad you brought up fall prevention, because we have a huge fall prevention program at Desert Oasis, because we know that is a huge thing. And I'm excited to see sometimes people a lot younger than 65 in those classes. And maintaining your balance is huge. But I like to tell people to actually, before we even talk about supplements, I want to go back to the basics. Like, what does your sleep look like? How much water are you drinking? We're in a desert here, right? And before we even talk about supplements and getting, whatever supplements can give us, because supplement means supplemental. Literally, it's in the word there. And I know you had obviously some already great information about nutrition and plants earlier, which is wonderful, because that does part of my work here, is what does your diet look like? You cannot supplement your way out of other poor habits, is what I like to tell people. But at the same time here, we have these diseases, in the land of plenty, kind of the, scourge of developed countries, if you will. But on the flip side, we have what's called food deserts. We have food insecurity. As people age, they may not be able to drive safely anymore. What if they don't have family or friends nearby who can get, how will they get groceries? So a lot of those kinds of things. Groceries are getting more expensive, and there is a lot of uncertainty. Also, some people who relied on supplemental programs for food, the issues with that. And again, those are huge topics and talks in and of themselves, but I would say those are concerns and things that we're dealing with every day.
Yeah, a lot of what we've relied on is under threat right now, so it's anxiety-provoking time. So in the time we have left, we've got about 5 minutes. You were alluding to some of the challenges that we have in the healthcare system. It's really stressed, especially post-COVID, and as providers, what's that like for you? So if you could kind of briefly highlight what you think the biggest challenges are going forward, what you deal with them, and what you'd like to see change.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on just the political climate and the changes that are happening. I think what's most, keeps me up or most heartbreaking is just, we've been talking about ending the HIV epidemic. By 2030, 5 years from now, And I feel like we probably weren't going to get there before this administration, but we were making huge inroads in that direction. And just with all the funding cuts, and like you said, just taking away from programs that have already proven to be so beneficial and successful and like instrumental in moving the needle towards ending the epidemic are getting cut. It just it's hard to stomach that that goal seems further and further away as these things are happening. And so I think it was at CROI this year that there was estimates of just with cutting funding to PEPFAR and things like that, and then they mathematically speculated what impact that would have on the global numbers of HIV for the pandemic. And Jeff, I don't know if you remember, it brought us back to numbers we were seeing, I think in like 2009, that's the number that comes to mind. 2009, we're in 2025, we were talking about ending the epidemic in 2030, and with all of this that's happening, we could set the needle back to 2009. So then there was a recent publication about like Ryan White locally, like what would happen in the US if Ryan White funding were completely cut versus just temporarily impacted. And again, those numbers are staggering. Tens of thousands of new infections that would have been averted that aren't anymore. So, I would say that's what I struggle with every day.
And what's really ironic is the Ending the Epidemic campaign, which is a formal government campaign, was started by the Trump administration. This was their signature piece of HIV legislation that they promoted. And now they completely put an about face and don't want to fund it anymore. So putting on my activist hat, watch your emails, look on Facebook. All these things are coming before Congress right now, including Ryan White funding that many of us rely on. That funds ADAP, not just Ryan White services, but ADAP that many of us rely on. So, go out there, vote, call your legislators, let them know, what this means to real people on the ground. Because it's stories like that have an impact. So, just my PSA there. But James, go ahead.
Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, what are the biggest challenges you're seeing as a provider in terms of providing care? How has that changed in recent years, and how are you coping with it?
Yeah, I would say probably the biggest challenges I face are just like healthcare system related problems with referrals to other specialists or getting a medication covered that they should be on. Just a lot of extraneous work that I shouldn't have to do, but I just have to because it's a really effed up system, and unfortunately we have to learn how to work within this effed up system. And I hate to be so gloomy about it, but it just is, and it's very complicated. I think also for me as a doctor, just struggling with documenting, with having such a crappy electronic medical record. It just kind of depends on like what organization you work in, but that is just a major hindrance to my productivity and being able to be efficient. And it's challenging, having to manage all of this different technology and being able to dig under the surface for your patients if they got admitted to Eisenhower, being able to get those notes, and even as a regional, and because none of these systems talk to each other. So it kind of behooves me to be able to have login passwords to all of these different systems, which I do, but it's just difficult. You've got 8 different links open up to kind of get through your day. It's just very challenging. And so I think burnout for providers right now is a big problem. And I think it's multifactorial. I think with COVID and just the political atmosphere right now, I got a lot of patients who just don't want vaccines anymore. They just don't want to talk about them, or so that can be challenging. When there's this regression. We're kind of stepping back in time, like Kathy said. With a lot of science denying, it's just frustrating to have to deal with that, because our jobs are hard enough. The job is difficult enough, and then when you have to factor all of that BS on top of trying to take care of patients, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So So I think it's important for us providers to also learn how to take care of ourselves. You know?
Yeah, we all do, right? So there was an Army student who did the opening presentation talked a lot about that. So Sarah, from where you sit, what does that look like? And what are your biggest challenges?
I mean, it's same to an end. But I mean, just even speaking, I mean, I think those are pretty global in some sense, especially since the pandemic. But I'll say also for, you know, I've lived in this desert. I'm not originally from here. I moved from Portland, but I've been here for about 15 years now. And just even the provider shortage that we have with the demographics of this desert is kind of even more large than what you might see. You know, there's just not enough healthcare providers in a lot of ways, and there's kind of fewer in some ways, especially since the pandemic. So speaking to the burnout, and it's hard because, you know, most of us, I would say, got into healthcare because we wanted to help people, you know, at baseline. And, you know, when you guys are, if you're my patient, I want you all to come in. I want to give you personalized care. I want to, you know, do all those things. But the realities of it make that very challenging, extremely challenging. When we've got a certain amount of time, and there's paperwork, and you've got 10 logins of trying to put all the records together of what's going on. It's just hard when you want to provide individualized care for somebody, and carrying individualized care where I'm looking at you and I'm not staring at a computer. It's tough, and yeah, we're trying to hire 2 dietitians for Desert Oasis, and we can't find any. So
This sounds to me like a call for single-payer healthcare. That's just me. So I didn't mean to end on a kind of a down note, but I think we're really fortunate to have providers like this here in the Valley that are advising us like Kathy does, or James and Sarah, you know, on the ground supporting us. And we're really fortunate here at Palm Springs to have that. That's why many of us moved here. So we're really grateful for you today to share your expertise. And thank you so much.
As a administrator, very old, the masters of motion, the mechanics. He likes walks on the beach, running. I'm sorry. It wasn't Grinder, it was Christian McGoldrick. He is also, you know, I have a PhD in clinical psychology, specializing in cognitive neuroscience, my old job. Welcome to the Magnificent. I don't fall like brown with it. Thank to the wonderful round. Right, didn't know. Because aren't we did us moving? Hello, your hands. Or you know what to do. What to do. So, to do one big hand. Thank you. Hi, everybody. How are you doing today? We good? And the arts of balance. Before we start, I wasn't willing. First thing, something with regards to illness before to our experts and really quite incredible. And so what I want to make real clear here is that I'm really in charge of asking to open your minds a little bit, not in the way of science maybe, right? My hope with what we talk about during my time here, this is about how we interpret. It's about how our relationship to our environment in the ways that we see it. In this case, what I talk about is physicology, which we'll get into. Okay. So anyway, just a little bit about myself. I got into the health and fitness field, or community, if you will, in second grade during the Presidential Fitness Award. Anybody remember that? I was hooked from that point. I loved it. I loved to run and jump and all of that. And 4 years ago, 60 years later, 60 plus years later, we still am doing things this way. Anyway, one thing led to the other. I moved to California when I was 18 and worked at a nightclub called Studio One in the backlots. And hopefully some of you have seen the documentary, but why I bring that up today really is because it was also one of the first dentist coach.
Okay, I'll do this in time. Okay, so it really was where the stuff, as the first stages developed, it was really where the cultivation of HIV and AIDS was experienced, and that was part of my experience. And so I am one of the board members of FERP. My motivation for being here was to honor all of the friends. I lost all my friends twice over during that time period. How I'm not HIV positive is beyond me. That's a gift from God in a sense. Um, But I did have a lot of the experiences of the illnesses that went along with that. So, for example, cytomegalovirus, MRSA. I had hepatitis, but at that time it was it was type A and B at the same time. So it was called non-AB, which turned into C eventually. So, I've been in the trenches with everybody for a really long time. And something that the reason I bring these things up is because all of this influenced what I'm going to speak about today, which is my physicology. Let me keep talking. So, physicology simply means the emotional study of the body. That's it. That's all it means. So that's a really big thing, right? Of what does it mean in essence? So my background was as a fitness trainer. I started work as a floor monitor at a place called Jim Morris Gym in 1976, and moved on from there. I started noticing when working with people similarities in what people talked about while we were working on a certain area. And I didn't know too much about that, but it was really at the time, but it was one of the catalysts that when I turned 40 years old, I decided to go back to school because that dialogue had accrued in a fairly big way based on my own experience, based on some of the health and wellness issues that I had at that time. All of this influenced. And so I went back to school 15 years, got my doctorate in clinical psychology, master's in physiological motion and biomechanics. And then I did a 3-year stint at a place called the Center for Human Development and Cognitive Neuroscience Research. I studied with and worked with Dan Siegel and Alan Shore. Dan Siegel wrote a book called The Developing Mind and Parenting from the Inside Out. And it started opening things up for me in a way that's interpretive. So today we're trying to give you a couple of snippets of things that I will encourage you to think about in relation to what we're going to do in a little bit. So that we have two brains. Our intestines in gestation come online first. There's some research coming out more recently that is our primary brain, and this is secondary. Most of our interpretation comes through here. The dialogue that this brain has is somatic. So everything that we feel and experience internally is being dialogued from our intestines. So if we're talking about HIV and AIDS, and for example, they were speaking about the differences in medication, each individual sitting in this room that's taking any medication for anything, as example, is having a relationship with that as it goes through our intestines, right? And it may not seem like much at the time because we get so used to living out here, right? I'm this or I'm that. So a couple of things I would like to encourage you to think of yourself as your own ethnographer, that life is your own exploration, right? And internally is really where our story's being created. Externally is really just helping as a collaboration. So for example, HIV and AIDS can be something that happened to us, or it can be how I see it, which is the profound experience that both you living with long-term HIV and AIDS have an unbelievable contribution to the collective community, right? Through science that was required to occur because of the frontier that you've been living, right? And so if we can even grab onto just a moment of that, it becomes something other than a disease or disorder. It becomes a contribution to all of society. And for me personally, it gives purpose to life, right? And so that's one thing that I would like you to consider today. Physicology and its application, or my physicology. The reason it's called that is because I have my own ethnography. I'm my own phenomenologist. I'm telling my own story. And each of you have your own physicology, right? Everybody has one. We don't often think about things in this way, and I want to encourage you to do, right? Because it lends itself to an opportunity to transform things that we saw as disease and disorder, and it's just something that's purposeful, and we can give back in ways, just by being here and telling stories, right? I want to share just a couple of myself. I had a couple of chronic traumas where I was molested by my grandmother and given my first rape on my first day at kindergarten. So I carried these two events with me in a really long way, and I lived half a century and something changed through my health and wellness at that point in time to where um just couldn't stand. And if I wanted to live, I had to change my perspective. And so drug addiction and alcoholism went along with that. And these things really acted as catalysts, really in a sense, to force me to change. Right. And so what's changed is a shift in perspective. So I want you to hold that space with that as we move forward with my physicology. So what that is in practice is the integrative process of body, mind, soul. All right. So what is that? Well, it's different for each of us. We're celebrating the art of balance today. Well, what is balance? Is it standing on one foot, which we are going to do in a minute if you want. Balance in here? Is it balance relationally, or is it all? Right? And how do each of us achieve it? So I did a little research and came up with a little writing, and I came up with a definition of what I would like you to consider as would get to that. So balance is loving what we once feared and letting it nourish. Let me say that one more time. Balance is loving what we once feared, allowing it to nourish us. Right? So that concept, and now let me move to the slide behind this, which is a comparative analysis that I've put together for the purpose of this. So I'd like you to think of yourself as a cell phone. How many people know how to use one and have one around it every day? How many are really good at working with the cell phone or not so much? So this slide really is giving concept and ideas to a different way of looking at some things, right? So I like to conceptualize it. How many bars of Wi-Fi in my work, right? Because if I don't have my Wi-Fi going, I can still use my cell phone, but it might be really slow. It's going to create some frustration. I may or may not have an image come up that I'd like to see or not see, different things like that. And quite frankly, from a neurological standpoint, the body works that same way, right? How connected are we to whatever it is we believe in, or are we even an atheist or agnostic and working completely offline, which is going to up the ante to every single thing we do? That's also a part of it. We certainly can. So that's one of the things I would like you to consider interpreting it. Here's an example of what physicology would suggest we're dealing with. Reclaiming sweetness without sabotage, ending a battle between our blood and our belief, shifting from personal restriction to personal redemption, whatever this means for us. It could be, rather than negating science, collaborate with it, have a conversation about it, be willing to be transparent about our own story. Because that in the relationship between is really where our connectivity exists. From what I write about and for physicology, we're a collective species first, individual person right? So we tend to get caught up in things out here, but in order for us to really stay connected in this way, we have to be elite, right? We have to consider the other person. And, the panel before talked about current climates and some of the difficulties and the challenges that are ongoing. How do we find goodness in all of this? Truly, how do we find goodness instead of chaos and all of the stuff that's occurring, right? Well, for me personally, this is my personal thing. I believe that we're a spiritual being having a human experience, and that we've come here for the purpose of what's currently happening. And that each and every one of us is extremely empowered to do the work that we're here to do because it's here. A very simple rule in psychology is, how do you know if you're working with somebody, when to bring up something that you might see in the room? And the answer is when it's in the room, right? So right now we've got a lot of in the room things in our, in our country here and worldwide, right? And so the only way that we can stay open to this stuff is to find reverie in what we're currently doing to honor each other's experience, no matter how different it is from ours, right? And so what I do with physicology is bottom-based, right? So as John told you, I teach a class at Ruth Hardin Park Monday through Friday at 7:30 in the morning. We do balance, we do dancing, we do cardiovascular, we have community, we really collaborate, we share things together. Some of the people that joined me in taking the class are here today. And we're gonna do a little demonstration, and I would encourage all of you to join us. We don't have to, but today we're gonna do 3 different movements. We're gonna do an active movement, which is going to get your heart rate up a little bit if you choose to participate. If you're uncomfortable with some up and down movement, you can, our first one especially, you can stay in your chair and do something with your arms above your head if you would like. And I'm going to ask Leonard and Mark and Sue if you would come up and sit in the chairs for us. We're going to do number 1, okay? Yeah. 1 of 3, I should say. There you go. Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. All right, the slide that you see right now is, before we get started, the slide that you see right now is the areas of the brain that are impacted from balance, right? So recently, the New York Times had an article on the 9-second rule in relationship to what does that mean regarding balance. So we are going to do a balance exercise today, and really what the 9-second rule is, it's in its earlier research, but it's about working memory. So the idea with aging, with aging, is that after 9 seconds, we lose our working memory. And so when you're standing, if you're standing in a balanced position for longer than 9 seconds, these particular areas in the brain have to recreate or create something new, if you will. So, the panel before us was talking about different nutritional choices and falling, right? And some of the concrete problems that we have with regards to this. Well, I don't know about you, but in my life, nobody has a magic wand that just waves it and things get better, right? It's like we have to combat that through our own actions and through our own choices. And so these are some of the things that we approach, right? These are some of the things that we approach in the class that I teach at the park, which, on a daily basis, we work on these things, right? So falling is a possibility for all of us, right? But the more we do the work and put some of the work in the bank, maybe a little bit less chance of breaking something once we fall. Or, we had that happen with one of our fellow students. He's 82 years old. He was in New York, and he was walking on the High Line and tripped and fell. Didn't break anything and recovered within 2 weeks to where he was back up and at it and back at class, right? So just an example of, we don't want to know what the comparison would be had he not done it, but I would suggest that, better this way than not, right? So let me put some music on. I would encourage you all to do it. What we're going to do really is just simply, it's called a chair swap. We're going to come from here, stand up, and we're going to do 10 of them. And I'd like you to go as fast of a pace as you feel comfortable with, okay? But I'm going to put on some motivation, so hang on a second here. All right, here we go, okay? All right, everybody. Ready? Here we go. Up one. There you go. And back down. And up. And down. All right, 10 times. This is number 3. Come on. There we go. Good. And 4. There you go. Let's take it to 10. Good. Oh, yeah. Excellent. Woo. Good. Hang in there. There you go. Hopefully this will help digest lunch as well, right? All right, as soon as you hit 10, bring it down. Oh, yes. There you go. Very good. All right, now what I want you to do is take a deep breath in through your nose. I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to experience what your body's telling you right now. Feel the heart rate going a little bit? So it said, I'm tired, which I'm going to address that in a second. Okay, that's another one. Okay.
I'm not cold.
There you go. Okay, so that's another part to it, right? So with each of these comments, there's something going on, right? So when I said the part about end the battle between our blood and our belief. So tired comes from the space of that would be a belief, it's this brain, right? Because if you got more than 2.5 hours of 7th REM sleep, which really stimulates cellular rejuvenation, your body's not tired, it's our interpretation of the body that is, right? That's just one example, right? So the other part was, what was the other? Oh, you weren't cold, right? So, okay, so the stimulation of the neurology, which is like electricity in our body, that stimulation is going to bring on some heat, right? So heat, warmth, now we have the associations that we can do with that. What are those for us, right? And so on and so on and so on, right? So we have these opportunities, and sometimes this stuff can get lost when we're living out here, right? However, it still just so you know, it still records in the brain. Every eye blink of what occurs, it records, right? So that's why, with the working memory and the 9 seconds of balance, that's why we can recreate things all the time. We're really quite amazing, extremely powerful beings, each of us individually, right? And so if we're willing to hold that space and bring that with us on a daily basis, no matter what we're dealing with. Today we're talking about balance and living gracefully with long-term HIV and AIDS, right? But I like what we did with regards to the title of this, positively aging, right? If you think about it, just that term is all inclusive, right? Everybody's aging every second of every day. So what we're really saying here at the core of it goes way beyond just the specific subject matter that brought us here together today. And it can include everybody, right? So I mean, what a remarkable message to share with community at large, right? And that's one of the things that I meant by being a leader in society, right? Yes, there's a lot of people in the room today that have had long-term HIV and AIDS. I live with somebody that is almost 40 years HIV positive. And what he deals with on a daily basis with the different medications and the timing and being sure he does it on time. And, it's a life in and of itself, right? And then that's just to get through the day. That doesn't have anything to do with any of the other stuff that we're talking about, right? And so the challenge of that is overwhelming, right? But yet, at the end of the day, it's like such a remarkable gift that those of you that are living with HIV and AIDS are giving the rest of society. I just really, truly want to honor you guys today in relationship to that. And now I want you to join me on the next thing, okay? All right, so what we're going to do, let's stand up. We can go to the next one. This here is a list of the differing things regarding balance, which is going to be our third movement. Right now we're going to do a stretch, right? So we've got active first. Next we're going to do a little bit of stretch with a bit of balance, and then the last one is going to be just balance, okay? All right, so hang on a second. Some more motivation. Different kind this time.
Imagine me and you.
All right, everyone. Okay, what we're going to do, cross your feet.
To think about the girl you
Okay, find your center here.
So happy that
We got it. All right, we're going to take a deep breath in.
If I should call you
and roll it out.
and
And again, all the way up.
and these men
Now roll it out.
imagine how
Now one more time, bring it all the way up. All right, what we're going to do is clasp your fingers together. You want to drop your shoulders and chin, pull the arms all the way back. Slightly bend to your right. And up and over to your left. Now from here, you're going to leave this here. Drop your arm over. Flex your hand. Bring your chin to chest. Pull the arm all the way back.
they toss it down.
And then bring it across.
The only home for me is you and you for
Excellent.
me. So happy
All right, shake it out. Switch your legs. Let's go the other way. Find your center here. Take a deep breath in. This time we're going to drop the ear over. Other way. Flex your hands. Chin to chest. Bring the arm all the way back. And bring it across. Gently press your arm towards your chest.
So happy together.
Good. All right, shake it out. So now, let me turn this down a second. So now after that move, that was elongating muscle tissue just a little bit, right? We're space limited here today, but otherwise we would have done a little bit more. So the nerves of our body lay on top of the muscle tissue. Stimulates and it is in constant conversation with the muscle tissue always. So how many senses do we have? Okay. So guess what? So here's the real truth with that. If we're using this brain, it's 5 or 6 and that's debatable, right? If we're using this brain, there's actually 32. Right? And so this is something that we just haven't really just talked a lot about. It's coming out of the neuroscience community. But there's sensory striations between the muscle tissue that's in constant conversation with our nervous system. There's neuropeptides around the heart that don't use our nervous system at all. It goes directly to reporting. Have anybody heard, oh, I felt that in my heart? Or have you actually experienced that? Well, that's why. It's because there's billions of neuropeptides that automatically record through expression. Right? So some of these things about the body that we don't really know, and yet it's our home, that this is where we live, right? So, I mean, the way to access this is not through this kind of dialogue, really. It's through our own movements and our own inner world, if you will, right? So now for the last one. The last one is really what we talked about regarding balance. Before we do that, I want to talk about, this is Stephen's slide, really, or I like to call it that, because when we were talking about what were we going to do, he liked the progress over perfection, right? So we can, the idea here is to strive for it's us versus us, ourself versus ourself, not me competing with you to see who can get better and get further ahead, right? The winner in this is the individual who's who can attach consciously to what the body's really trying to express, and then interpret it in a way and share it with another person so it can help the next person, right? Like kind of like a linked chain. And everybody in this room has mass quantities of stuff to share. Mass quantities of stuff to share. So now we're going to work on the last one's going to be the 9-second balance, right? So the idea behind this is after 9 seconds, your brain, which we showed earlier, is going to have to recreate, not using memory, the positioning that we're in, right? So the idea behind this, when we talk about something practical like falling as we get older, or brittle, or this or that or the other, these things, these little practical exercises that we can do work directly against these things. It works, and they're not that difficult to do. It just requires daily practice. Even if it's 5 minutes, like we do an hour at the park every morning, then we work out hard, right? But it's also all inclusive, and everybody gets to do exactly this, right? What's for them? Take what you need, kind of, and leave the rest, sort of thing, right? So on that note, all right, on this, let's all take a deep breath in and roll it out. And one more time, bring it all the way up. Okay, bring it down to center. All right, so what we're going to do, I want you to lift one leg. We're just going to hold it. So when we're in the slide, add it like this. If that's more comfortable for you, that's fine. And if you have to put a hand on the chest, that's okay too. If you're seated in a chair, what you can do is close your eyes, and I'd like you to put your arms to the side. Keep your head upright and angle your arms. There you go. And then the other way. And that was 12 seconds. All right, so now let's shake it out, and we're going to do the other side. Okay? So now switch to the other leg. Okay? If you want to do here, that's fine. We do at class, we do a different one every day. So let's keep going. Now if you're ready, arms to the side. And the other way. All right, let's give everybody a big hand. Woo! Well, everybody. All right. So, who had some challenges with that? Anybody? Okay. All right. So, with the challenge that you're having, what's happening with that is once we hit a certain spot, your body isn't sure what to do, right? So the dialogue there, your body's going, I'm used to my working memory. I'm not sure how to etch this out. Because on the slide before this, about two before this, with the brain, that's all free territory. So what's happening is there's something called gray matter on the outside of the brain. It's having to pull from that and create a new pathway when we do this, right? So this is something that can be done at home. It can be done with a finger on the podium, like to be honest, what I did on the second one. There's any different ways that it can be done. What I'm going to encourage everybody to do here is to do it, to practice it, or come join us at the park during the week. So just to put this all together, because I know it seemed like all over the place. Honestly, it is. Body, mind, the integrative process of body, mind, soul. What is that? Well, we did that today, right? Did anybody have a feeling while we were doing this? Yeah. All right. And so we had movements. So we had dialogue, conversation. Hopefully, I have shared a little bit of information regarding the body that you did not know. Some things that maybe you can take with you. Certainly be open to to the possible expressions of what's moving forward. And then the biggest thing of all that I would like to say in relationship to this is when science presents, especially in the West, there's two hemispheres of research. There's quantitative and qualitative measurement. So most sciences that we're talking about are quantitative measurement, which is going to be statistical data, and this means this, and this means that. And that's fine. That in and of itself is a part of information. And then we have the spiritual being having the human experience that's going through whatever it is we're talking about, right? And that part of it has to be honored equally. Otherwise, we're not in balance, right? And so that's another expression of balance. So that being said, qualitative measurement would be ethnography and phenomenology, some of the things we talked about today. So we had an ethnographic experience here today towards the end in the movements, and now each of you have your own phenomenology with that, which is telling your own story about how it was for you, you know, and be really rigorously honest with yourself, you know, and that's where we can make some progress. And we're in charge of recording this and developing this, whatever it is. You know, we don't have to wait till the outside in impacts us. We get to decide what things are going to be. And this is something that I like to say, and I'll close with this. When we look for the goodness in other people, we get to find it in ourselves. So for that, thank you for sharing today. I really appreciate it. Have a good day. Thank you.
It's about me promo.
Oh, okay. Whoever's curious about Ruth Hardy Park at the end, we're there Monday through Friday at 7:30 a.m. Bring yourself and
Could you see about doing something mid-morning here myself?
yeah, I certainly could. Okay. Yes. We're right by the parking lot.
Southwest corner.
Yeah, southwest corner. You can't miss us, actually. So, and if anybody, I'm going to be here for a little bit. Please feel free to talk to me. We can give you the information because they're on next. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
I recognize that I owe thanks to a number of people who in various ways were kind enough to welcome me here to the podium today. Jennifer Morton. Now retired as a board member, but the very active editor of Paz magazine, recently put me on the cover. Yeah. Of her magazine, and thereby created the idea that I might be here today. Thank you, Jennifer. And to the board of directors, whom I don't know all of you, but Stephen, your fellow staff members, everybody here, and the volunteers needed to make such organizations successful. Thank you for allowing me these moments with you. And of course, I want to thank those of you kind enough to come and stay. A lot of people left, but I'm glad that you stayed to hear what I might say today. I don't need to tell you that these are difficult days in America. They're difficult because the generations we represent have never seen hostilities and hatreds cut loose on America as we're seeing today. We have been largely spared nights with white-robed riders charging into our neighborhoods to burn a cross and hang an innocent. We came mostly after the scourge of Senator Joseph McCarthy, who used indecent accusations to slander decent people. We were, many of us, groomed in the age of television, which was following the age of radio. The internet and social media can still baffle the oldest among us, which would certainly be me. We were, I think, mostly unprepared for the assaults on our nation and even our world being wrought by the current administration. I hate to say, I told you so, But on this one issue, as early as 2015, I was warning friends and colleagues alike that a sex offender who saw the world as reality TV was gaining the power and claiming the presidency. I have to say, I take no joy in having been right. So I'll not spend time dwelling on the wrongs that surround us and fill the airwaves of every day's broadcasts and publications. You know, the false claims and daily crises designed to keep our thinking low and our blood pressure high. These are the days in which we live. These are the days in which we've come together. And these are the days in which we search for hope and for meaning. I take some enthusiasm from the fact that we are ourselves, at whatever age, but aging, a community of survivors of a plague named AIDS. If you have been here since the beginning of this gathering, you've been introduced or reintroduced to the 4 pillars of good health as promoted by Dean Ornish. He recommends a nutritious diet, a program of exercise, attention to mental and spiritual health, and engagement in community. It's an admirable outline for good living, I think, and one that I confess I violate with alarming regularity. For example, I've known an almost infinite variety of diets and weight control programs that didn't stick. And I've tackled exercise the way I've reached out to old friends, and is very sporadic. But the third pillar, which speaks of mental and spiritual health, is familiar territory. In my life, I have, as many of you have, walked through some very dark valleys of despair. Some of such days were driven by broken promises or broken relationships. Some came on the heels of erroneous prescriptions and pharmaceutical miracles that were, in fact, pharmaceutical mistakes. And some came because of the kind of losses that branded the AIDS epidemic from the beginning and found me in the late 1980s. There was an urgency about being engaged with others who suffer what we suffer, who know the fears and the pains that we need not explain. What fuels my own activism is in large measure, the losses I've known as a member of the AIDS community, and my commitments to not let the nation forget. There was Arthur Ashe, gentle, brilliant, caring. He was gone just weeks after we met. We need to remember him and his profound wisdom. There was Jeffrey Schmaltz, a lesser-known hero and the New York Times journalist assigned to the so-called AIDS beat. In another setting, I once said that Jeffrey was sophisticated, urbane, analytic. He was also infected with the disease he was covering. In the year that we had together, we grew close, very close. He asked me to offer a eulogy at his memorial service, which I couldn't imagine would ever be required. But in the last story he filed for the Times, he wrote, "A miracle is possible, and for a long time I thought one would happen. But let's face it, a miracle isn't going to happen. One day soon, I will simply become one of the 90 people in America to die that day of AIDS." A few weeks later, he was gone, and I am still here to remember him. There was playwright and novelist Paul Manette. As we struggled through a dinner a few weeks before he passed, Paul spoke as he had written. I don't merely want a cure, he wrote. A cure will come too late. I want my friends back. Paul's sense of profound loss deserves to be remembered, and be remembered by us, because you and I are here today as survivors in a community rooted in the experience of loss. For 15 years, roughly from 1981 to 1996, to be infected with the virus was a death sentence, waiting to be carried out. We are not only a community of loss, we are much more than that today. But if anyone wants to understand us and our tenacious clinging to one another, they need to know that AIDS formed a community based on the shared experience of loss, deep, enduring, undeniable loss. I learned about that sense of loss myself when, during my first 5 years in the AIDS community, I spent days and nights preparing to die, trying to find ways to protect my preschool-aged children, believing that I was destined not only to experience loss, but also to be the cause of loss when I left them as orphans. Being engaged with others, avoiding the temptation to isolate, is necessary for good mental health. So says Dean Ornish. So says my own experience. And so said the past Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, who observed that by 2023, enough of us were isolating to create, and I quote, the public health crisis of loneliness, isolation, and lack of connection. He noted that before COVID-19 had moved in, approximately half of the United States adults reported experiencing measurable levels of loneliness. And loneliness comes with consequences. 29% increased risk of heart disease, 32% increased risk of stroke, 50% increased risk of developing dementia. Overall, 60% of premature death. Said Dr. Murthy, we need to cultivate a culture of connection. That's a challenge when our nation is polarized and we are stumped when asked to make a difference. But we do. Which may take us to Pillar 4, which is Ornish's suggestion that our wellness depends in part on our ability to participate actively within at least one community. For those who find themselves in the AIDS community, however you got here, I think it's especially important that we define our community not only by loss, but also by purpose. There's a reason you and I are here. A reason we have not yet followed those we've loved. We are citizens in a community of purpose that gives lives meaning, our lives meaning. In Uneasy Silence, my book, I tell the story of my slide into isolation as the COVID pandemic rolled in and opportunities to speak rolled out. I became mute because there were no longer invitations to events like this one. I was drawn out of my isolation by a different kind of invitation, one I had never anticipated. I became a grandmother. Who would have thought, really? And while I was happily grandmothering, I received an opportunity to participate in the community that thrives around Project Angel Food here in California. Project Angel Food feeds the hungry, thousands of them, and it thrives on volunteers. When I joined the ranks of those volunteers, peeling onions and joining in the kitchen banter, My sense that there was a reason to be alive was rekindled. Service gave me a reason to be alive. And the good people of Project Angel Food brought me back to life. If the American AIDS community is a community rooted in loss, it is also a community that's called to a single purpose. And I'm convinced that our purpose is to bear witness to the epidemic that has not yet ended. When the survivors of the Nazi camps staggered out of the barbed wire and stench, they could not change what had happened in those places. The unspeakable horrors were done. But the survivors could bear witness to the slaughter, and in the bearing witness, find a purpose in their own lives. And so they did. I believe that for the AIDS community to thrive, we need to be gifted at bearing witness to the half-century of AIDS that is soon upon us. We need to know not only the losses, but also the lessons. We need to be able to tell the facts, the histories, the heroes. We need the capacity as a community to reject the broadly held premise that AIDS has been cured in America. We need to know the stories of the 40,000 to 50,000 new members who join our community annually. And we are not alone. We need to know and bear witness to the rampant dying that marks our global brothers and sisters. These include the millions of men, women, and children whose lives have been saved by a program known as PEPFAR that will be lost by the slashing of USAID funding. We need to know our common history and have the ability to tell it as a form of bearing witness on behalf of those we've lost. To be a robust community, we need to know the stories of our community. For example, I told the following story hundreds of times and included in the book for our mutual education and amusement, because it is so wonderfully captures a moment in our community's history. Think back. It was the spring of 1996 when I met a wonderful, elderly public health nurse in Little Rock, Arkansas. Little Rock's favorite son, Democrat Bill Clinton, was running for re-election. I'd been invited to keynote an AIDS benefit despite my identity at that time as a Republican. Before I spoke, as I wrote in Uneasy Silence, awards were being given to various local AIDS champions, including this nurse. Of the several hundred people in the room, I was probably the only Republican. Everyone was being very discreet. No one mentioned politics or party loyalties. No one, that is, until the nurse was granted the final tribute. She sprinted to the podium, took firm grasp of the microphone, and opened with, quote, "I've had it with them dumb Republicans." No one moved while she proceeded to make her point. For 15 years, I've talked to them dumb Republicans. Over and over, I've explained there ain't but 3 ways you can get AIDS: swab needles or blood, have sex, or get born with it. And for 15 years, these dumb Republicans kept asking, can't you get it from mosquitoes? I'm telling you all right now that from now on, I'm going to tell them yet. You can't get it from mosquitoes, but only in 3 states: Florida, Louisiana, and Arkansas. Because them's the only states mosquitoes grow so big that Republicans can have sex with them. True stories never fail. I mean, that's really the truth. It was hard to follow her, actually. We are a community of loss. We're a community of purpose. And we're also a community with humor. If we lose our ability to laugh, especially at ourselves, it will be a tragic loss indeed. If I may, let me add one more descriptor of the AIDS community. It has always been a community of mutual affirmation. We have rarely been divided over silly disputes or minor differences. When we hear one of our community colleagues say, "I'm just not enough," our answer is, yes, yes, you are. You're more than enough. But I can't do enough. Then do what you can with what you have and where you are. If you can't change the world, change your neighborhood. If you can't change your neighborhood, change one person's view of AIDS. Know that you don't need to do more than that is within your reach. It's always enough. And so are you. The AIDS community is populated by people of every gender, every race, every religion, every hope, every fear. What bonds us together is vastly more than what divides us. May it always be so. One of the realities that confronts our community is that some of us have been at this struggle for a very long time. The refusal of policymakers to build laws and establish priorities on facts, not fiction, is wearing. The inability to achieve even simple funding goals can make us feel unvalued. We write, we speak, we organize, and we wear out. Sometimes the footnotes to life or to a book are important. For me, the footnote on page 209 of Uneasy Silence is the call to action that I often need most. I'd like to read that to you now. Taylor Branch tells this story in his history of the civil rights movement, Parting the Waters, America in the King years, 1954 to 1963. Early in 1956, the Alabama bus boycott was failing. No laws had changed, no buses had been integrated, no one was suffering except those who walked. Then came a little-known hero from Montgomery's African-American community, Mother Pollard. For untold decades, she had cared for the sick and raised the orphans, black and white alike. Now, in her waning years, Mother Pollard joined the boycott and walked. As the days stretched to weeks and then months, she walked. When the winter weather worsened and she began to slip and fall, against the advice of King and others, she would pick herself up time after time and walk. A meeting was called to consider ending the boycott and finding another means of protest. The crowd was divided between speeches and arguments until Mother Pollard rose to speak. "I would rather crawl on my knees than ride on a bus," she told the hushed and now embarrassed crowd. She spoke of years of humiliation, of self-hatred, of injustice and shame. She noted that the outcome would have little to do with her life, but much to do with the lives of her many children. And then she gave the entire civil rights movement one of its classic refrains. When she concluded, "My feet is tired, but my soul is rested." On the days when we feel like the darkness is overcoming the light, in the nights when we wonder if we are gaining any ground on ignorance and bias, in such moments, let us move our weary feet once more so that our souls can be rested. In that, grace to you and peace.
Thank you, Mary Fisher. Let's hear it.
Mary's agreed to take any questions from the audience if you would like to ask one or two or three. We have our microphone runners.
Any question? So, you're rightly famous for the amazing speech. Sorry, I always get verklempt when I hear you speak. But at the Republican National Convention, people hear this? Here we go. So I wonder how that came to be, how the Republicans came to have someone living with HIV speak at their convention, and what that was like. If you could tell that story for us.
Well, briefly, although it wasn't brief, the President, Bush, wanted me to do it. I had written him a letter, and they had lost a daughter early in their daughter's life, and so they knew what it was like, and he knew my father, and my father was his financial person, so he knew what Dad would be going through, and my dad not necessarily didn't want to help, that's not the way those things go, but so I thought maybe he would, and he did. He wanted me to speak, so it was. And the people running the convention were all people I had worked with in the 70s when I worked for Gerald Ford. And so it was, I kept saying, "You're talking to me like you think I'm the only Republican with AIDS." And Red, who used to be my boss, said to me, "Well, aren't you?" And I go, "Yeah, okay, no." But okay, I can't. So anyway, that's how it came about. And so that's what I did. Yeah, thank you. You're welcome.
What were you, or who were you wearing that evening? That gown was that?
Oh, thank you. And you know what? I don't think it was anybody in particular, but my mother said, because makeup person, what's her name? Where'd Jennifer go? Oh, I can't even think of her name. Okay. Anyway, she said, wear something with white around. And so, black and white. I have not been able to wear that dress since. But I still have it, just in case somebody wants it. But thank you for that. That's very nice. I appreciate that. I have to tell you though, just a moment to understand that speech was, I had to do a 1 minute kind of video to tell people who I was, because who would know? I mean, how would they care? They needed to understand that I came from a Republican family, that I worked for a Republican president, and they were here watching. And so I had to tell them who I was. And because there was nobody that could introduce me that could tell that story. So I made a little video and I had that. And when I was up there, I need to tell you how, I know this sounds really weird, but on the spirituality part of all of it, and that we talk about all the time, is I felt not alone on that stage. I know I was not alone, and I felt, it was like incredible. I was buoyed up, and I actually, because I wasn't sure I really trusted everybody, I memorized the speech because they said, oh, don't worry if the teleprompters go out, you know, the book will be there and you can go through the book. Well, there was no book when I got up there, so I was really glad that I memorized it. But the teleprompters were working, but I already knew it, so. But anyway, so it was a very special kind of moment in my life to say, which I always do, I say this little prayer before I speak, which is always let me say it the way they need to hear it. And I think they did.
No, I was just wondering, the horrible state. No, I was just wondering, with the horrible state the Republican Party is in today, do you do any kind of activism within the Republican Party anymore?
Well, it's a really good question because I used to do that, and I was the one that could talk to the Republicans. But my party just went somewhere else and left me here, so I have to be really honest, I don't have those values anymore. My values have my values are people, my values are helping, and my values is service. And I don't see that happening.
Thank you. Did anyone come up to you after your speech and say, I am living with HIV or have family or friends, and make it a personal comment?
There was a man whom I didn't know, but I did know him. He got a press pass in some way, and he snuck in. And he was down at the bottom of the whatever your podium place. And I looked down, and there he was, and he tore open his shirt, and he had a T-shirt on underneath that said, "Nobody knows I'm HIV positive." And then they pulled him out of there. And I'm giving my speech, and I'm looking at him, and I'm going, Stephen, oh my God. I mean, I loved that he was there because ACT UP was outside boycotting me because I think they thought I was going to give it, I was not going to do it right or something. But and then Larry Kramer became a very good friend of mine, and so he would do the yelling and I would do the whispering.
I'm curious, in the beginning at the AIDS cycle, we had a focus and a goal and everything like that, and it gave us a purpose. Nowadays, we're overwhelmed with frustrations in the political climate. We have no concept of where to turn to fight and protest and do things. And for me, I was involved, my previous career I had clients that were pharmaceutical companies. And it was amazing to me, I got to sit into very private meetings where I learned that it's strictly a business. And AIDS became the perfect business model. And to sit in a room and hear them talk, not necessarily about AIDS, but no, we don't want to pursue this illness because it's too easily curable and there's no money involved in it. And then to have a very close personal friend who's one of the best AIDS researchers in the country tell me, I've discovered a cure for AIDS 20 years ago, but his research was funded by a pharmaceutical company, and the day that his research paper landed on the pharmaceutical company, the next day, every computer, every piece of paper was collected from his office, and that program was shut down. And of course, when you start these programs, you sign a non-disclosure agreement. So how do we fight these things?
Let me just say, would you have a... Oh, not that one, but I was looking for the cause. Yeah, oh. Let me. I spoke to many pharmaceutical companies during my years, and some that came out with new drugs, and I had a problem because I still can't take protease inhibitors, so I'm on some of the very early stuff. And we just need to keep telling the truth. This is what we have to do. We have to keep saying what the truth is. And you tell that story to people. And I go, oh my God, a cure. But we've come so far anyway. And I know that it's a medicine and it's a medical and it's money and all of that. We have come so far, and I'm here. And I'm still here. We're all still here. And I think that we have to just say, grateful for the medical community and the researchers, pissed off because they cut them all off from NIH and CDC and everywhere else, and that's not right. But if you look at the back of Paz magazine, I honestly know it's that one. But the back cover, really seriously, look at all these meds that we have, and the ability to also give medications to prevent it if they take it. I don't know why anyone would want to take this medication, but that's okay. I won't go there. But the point is that it's important. PrEP is important, and if all that kind of stuff gets cut and slashed and all of that, then we're going to be in a really bad situation. But really, we have done a lot. Not me or anything, but our community. And it's because of our community that this is here, these are here, because we fought. We can't give up now. Now is not the time to give up. Because we have to tell the stories. It's like if we don't tell the stories of what happened in the 80s and the 90s, nobody's going to know, and these younger generations don't have a clue. And it's important. That's our job. Well, that's my job. But it's my purpose. It's what I have to keep doing. And I am sorry about your friend and the researcher, because I have friends who are researchers, and some of the similar things happen to them too. And I have no answer for that. There's no good answer for that. And but that doesn't mean you're still here today. And I'm glad you're here.
I am too.
So we have to go with that, and we have to say, we're going to do what we can do, and we do what we do where we are. You can't do everything, but you can do something.